Policy and Priorities Committee meeting to order for Monday, July 9th, 2018. And I need approval of the agenda. Seconder? All in favor? Adoption of the minutes for May 14th, 2018 PNP meeting. Councilor Crowder.
Council adopts the minutes of May 14, 2018 Policy and Priorities Committee meeting as presented.
Seconder, Councilor Hawk. All in favor? Any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, we will break to delegations and welcome gentlemen. Greg, Mark, Trevor, and Rob. I'm not sure which order you're in there.
Mark Van Tassel, I'm the Acting District Manager for the Peace District with Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations for the time being.
Trevor Hand, Recreation Officer for Northeast BC.
Rob Ersman, Engineering Officer, Peace Forest District, Dawson.
Jason Olmsted, I'm the Northern Engineering Group Leader for the Ministry of Forest.
And Greg Van Dola sends his regrets. He wasn't able to make it this evening, so I'm here in his stead. So.
Okay, and I see you talking about the Wolverine Road.
Yes. Yeah, so we had a commitment to you when we were here back in, I believe, January to do some further looking into this issue, looking into potential options or different funding mechanisms for the Wolverine FSR. We also wanted to go out and look at the road in the springtime after spring runoff, spring freshet, and see what kind of condition it was in, and see if there was further works needed or what the situation was. So we're just following up on that commitment, and thank you very much for your time and for the time on the agenda today. So I guess I'll just jump into it if that's okay.
Yeah, you bet.
So we have a bit of an overview of the presentation. We have some, we want to provide you with some updates on our actions and commitments since the January 15th meeting, results of the spring inspection, what our current plans are at this point, options for community involvement moving forward, and then I've included a lot of the pictures that we have of the different structures to give an idea of some of the issues we're dealing with here, if we have time to go through some of those. So a recap of the issue to date. The Wolverine Forest Service Road is also a designated rec trail, so the two designations are on top of each other right now. The Wolverine is not currently an active industrial road. It's what we would call a wilderness state, and I'll ask my engineering team here to jump in if I state anything. So the rec trail was functional, but the inspections in the fall of 2017 identified that there were several structural issues with several of the bridges on the Wolverine that were of concern to our ministry for safety and for environmental reasons. And there's several bridges on this chunk of road at 26 kilometer, 32 kilometer, 34 and a half, 35, 37, and 52 kilometers. So lots of bridges. And there's a lot of issues identified. Most of these were the structural issues were due to what appears to be a large rainfall event that happened sometime late last summer. So usually with a Forest Service road, there's two options for us. Usually it's industrially active, which means one of the major industries, either a forestry company, a mine, or an oil and gas company, is designated as a primary maintainer. They're actively using that road, and if there's a repair issue required for that road, they're responsible for doing that. When the road is non-industrially active, it becomes a ministry maintained road or wilderness road, and then basically we leave it in a self-maintaining state. We can go out and do minor repairs to it, a little bit of bridge decking and some minor maintenance as things allow, but there is no funding available for large maintenance projects on these wilderness roads. So as we identified back in January, Our ministry funding policies don't allow for repair of structures using our engineering liability funds. So our engineering liability fund bucket is really for deactivation of these wilderness type status roads. Once a major structural issue is identified, to go in and basically deactivate the road, remove bridges, culverts, put in water control measures, grass seed, and with the intent of closing and discontinuing the road at the end of it. And I've also circulated provincial documents, frequently asked questions around our engineering program funding policy, and it does actually speak to some similar situations. So when we were here last time, our initial plan in December of 2017 was deactivate the road, remove the bridges, and hopefully be able to reestablish the rec trail following deactivation if possible. So we were looking at how do we remove the bridges but redesign the crossing so it'd still be acceptable for a rec trail. But of course there's issues. Some of those bridges are quite large, and there's no real good option to put rec trail access in there if there's no bridges. And then, yeah, as I said, at January 15th meeting, we committed to investigating further options, looking into seeing what funding options there was available, and if we could think of any other options to try to keep the Wolverine FSR open, or at least from being fully deactivated. So we're here to report out on that. So there was a few other things we committed to doing. We hired an independent engineer through Trevor's program, who went out and looked at some of the bridges.
He's designed some crossing structures and is going to go back and reassess it now that snow-free conditions, and kind of schedule here for maybe next week following.
Okay. We've looked at our provincial funding policy and done quite a bit of digging into it. We've looked at different alternate tendering options. So one of the concerns here is liability from the ministry and our liability funds. If we had another user, another industrial user, or another individual who's willing to take over that road, we could talk about retaining some of those structures in place while removing the ones that were a challenge for us. We conducted site inspections post spring freshet, which we actually did the flights and inspections on June 21st. Rob and Jason were out, so that just happened a couple of weeks ago, which is why we wanted to try to get in front of you and let you know our results. And we have been reviewing alternate options to the activation throughout this winter and spring. So we do still have some current challenges. We haven't been able to find any good alternatives within our provincial funding policy. Again, if they're used, liability funds must be used for deactivation, and the FSR must then be closed and discontinued. Which unfortunately means that if we're just going forward with the full deactivation on liability funds, all bridges must come out, or an alternate party needs to be identified who's willing to take over the liability on the road. We've looked at potentially rec sites and trails taking over the structures, bridge structures that are still in good shape, including the one across the Wolverine itself, which is at the end of the road, under their program. But unfortunately, they're in a very similar situation. They don't have the funding capacity or the technical capacity to take over these bridges. They've taken over several of the rail trestles and things down south as a larger program, and they're having difficulties with that and starting to realize the challenges with that. And that would be with the district providing some assistance around inspections and some minor work. The bigger issue there is the liability issue with the bridges, that if something happens to those bridges, another large rain event, and say one of the further in bridges again has a structural issue, how do we get in to repair it? How would that be deactivated? That sort of thing. And so where we're at is this really results in the Wolverine Forest Service Road and a lot of other Forest Service roads around the province actually being in a bit of a gap between program mandates and provincial funding programs. So we are aware that I believe this Ministry of Tourism is looking at a plan for this, but it's still in early stages, and we have been in touch with them. So this is on their radar, but very early stages. So the current status is at this time, the Wolverine FSR remains a liability issue for the province, and again, public safety and environmental being our two big concerns, and we'll show you some pictures to get a better understanding of that at the end. The spring inspections showed some, I believe, minor deterioration in some of the structures, but overall they withstood the spring runoff not too badly considering the shape they were in. However, there's some that are in pretty rough shape still, with some of the elements and not failing, and some pretty serious structural issues. Unfortunately, while we've looked at a lot of different options, at this point, from our available options as a ministry, we haven't been able to identify any really good feasible options to manage this on our own or without outside support. So I mean, we can talk about partnership options or different tendering scenarios if there's an interest there, but we're kind of at a bit of between a rock and a hard place on this one, I think.
Yeah, somebody basically, man, besides government, has to take over liability of the road. So other areas, sometimes the community took over, get tenure over it, becomes part of the community access, basically. They got to make sure they have the right liability, insurance and everything to take on the trail. So that has happened in a couple places where we can work with that. And what we do normally is try to stabilize under liability, make everything as good as possible, and ensuring that whoever takes it over is capable of doing so, and everything's in place, and then it becomes basically their land, their area, their responsibility, no longer government's.
So on our schedule right now, we do have in-stream work windows to be aware of, and that's primarily related to fish and concerns around fish. And those are between mid-July to mid-August, so we really need to kind of make a decision on our end on how we're going to move forward here extremely shortly, because if we need to do any in-stream works, which is installation or removal of bridges, installation of temporary bridges, we need to be planning that work pretty imminently here. So unfortunately our current situation here is we can't be leaving the bridges in the state they're in as it stands. We've left them for the winter, and we've been trying to explore options. Currently the rec trail's closed, but if we can't work through, find out some quick options here, our plan currently would be to continue or initiate the start of a deactivation program for the Wolverine FSR. That would begin this summer, and it would be at least a 2-year project, I would believe, just because of timing and logistics issues. We would need to put in some temporary access. As I said, some of these bridges, as you'll see from the pictures, aren't safe to move any sort of equipment across, and we would need to put in, bring some equipment in to remove some of the structures further back. So the first step would be working from the front to the back, essentially pulling out the structures that are of concern and putting in temporary bridges over those stream crossings and working our way to the back. And that would probably be the work we would do this year, I would imagine. Yep. Which would be that then we would look at the following year starting to deactivate bridges from the back end of the road, working out. So this year, because we would probably be looking at only putting in temporary access, that may still allow for the use of the rec trail this coming winter. And that may allow us for some further time for some discussion or some exploration of options. But at this point, I think that's basically our plan for at this moment. Similarly with the rec trail, I could turn it over to Trevor if he's got any more comments, but it's I guess the largest bridge, the back of the Wolverine, most of the recreational values, if I'm speaking correctly, are beyond that bridge. So,
Well, I think you're probably right. Yeah, there's great snowmobiling in the back end of the valley. Lots of great access for hikes up there. few other features that I've become aware of is some abandoned tunnels back there, yeah, the Wolverine crossing and the 32 crossing are the two structures that are really critical for folks to access the back end of the valley. And upon our investigations on our flight, the other crossings would be totally suitable for a ford, and could be easily forded by an ATV or a person on horseback, or even someone if you're in a pair of hiking boots during the appropriate time of year.
But unfortunately, if we can't find an alternate to keep those last couple of structures in, it's probably not really viable as a rec trail after that, as a designated rec trail.
Yeah, probably I couldn't I wouldn't want to have it underneath my umbrellas for public safety reasons and then environmental reasons as well. So I think keeping the Wolverine structure and 32 in there are pretty critical. And in order to do that, I think there needs to be someone else helping to manage those structures. And I don't have a toolkit or a budget to manage big structures.
So we wanted to bring to the table a few alternate tenuring options. And as we mentioned before, full deactivation may not be required if an alternate party was willing to take over the tenure on the road or obligations on the road. And I've had Rob work up a couple of budget scenarios on roughly what the different options would be. But we've looked at a couple different options. Tumbler Ridge has a community forest, so they are considered a major forest tenure holder. One thing that's been done elsewhere in the province in similar situations is the community forest has applied for a road permit over the road. We've been able to grant them a road permit. In this case, even though this road doesn't directly serve the community forest, we could tie it to their tenure, so that is one potential option. Understanding that, of course, they probably wouldn't be using it operationally, but they would take on responsibility for those whatever remaining bridges and structures that were left in there. We would then go forward and remove and deactivate those bridges that were of concern to us and probably put them in with fords or other recreation standard crossing structures until such time as another industrial user wanted to go in there and work with the community forest as the road permit holder to take over that road. Similarly, if that would have to be a discussion, I guess, between yourselves and the community forest group. I'm not sure exactly of all the details of the relationship there, but I'm pretty sure it's a fairly close one. There's other actual tenures that municipality could apply for directly from the province. One would be under the Land Act. License of occupation is probably the correct tenure. I would have to bring in one of our land staff to talk to you about what that would look like. But there are options there under the Land Act for the community itself to hold tenure on Crown land. And there may be a possibility. So there are things like liability deposits and annual rent and those sort of things tied to it. But we could look at our policy options through the Land Act and see what kind of flexibility we have. There's different things like nominal rent tenures for communities and organizations as possibilities. Under the Forest Act, there's also a 10-year special use permit. It's not usually our go-to tenure for this type of thing, but it is possible to put a special use permit very similar to a Land Act tenure over top of a road. We could theoretically manage it that way. Again, that would be a tenure to the community. There would be some liability costs associated with that. We need deposits in that. Generally, that's standard practice in case the tenure holder defaults on their obligations. There needs to be some funding, a deposit available for us to access if we needed to go back in and do the work. Tumbler Ridge, I did check out where the municipal boundary was to see if there was another option for you. Unfortunately, I believe the municipal boundary for Tumbler Ridge falls right just on the other side of the mine site. So while it's still an industrially active FSR, and I don't know the processes around that, but that would potentially be another option to explore if the municipality wanted to take it over. So if this was the case and under an alternate tenuring option, deactivation would still have to occur on some bridges until or unless the tenure holder decided to replace those structures. And again, as I said, if an alternate tenure holder or an alternate option isn't identified, we'll have to start working towards the full deactivation plan pretty quick here. So I think what I wanted to show you now is some of the pictures that we have. This is the 26-kilometer bridge, and while structurally fine, if you look at this picture, you can see that's quite an environmental concern. There's been a lot of scour there and bed load. So there's not a lot of clearance on that bridge right now, and I think we've cleaned that out once before, if I'm correct.
$45,000.
Yeah, $45,000 to clean that out previously, and it's built up again. So a large rainflow event or a large spring runoff and a large tree coming down could potentially take out that bridge, and we'd have some environmental concerns there with the bridge somewhere downriver that we'd have to deal with.
That picture doesn't show the heavy scour on the low chainage side, which pretty much dictates this bridge too short.
Yeah,
So it would have to be
I think is that the one?
not really marked.
Oh, okay.
Any bridge, longer bridge necessary.
Yeah, so this bridge needs to be longer and higher, so it'd have to be basically pulled out. We'd have to build up the abutments and put the bridge quite a bit higher up.
But totally fordable. We built a ford.
For ATVs and so on. And this is one of the structures that's of significant concern to us is the 32-kilometer bridge, and this is one here where lock blocks were used, and you can see from the picture that they're completely failing. So again, probably one really good rainflow event for that bridge collapsing.
Even a thaw freeze in the winter with the moisture could pop.
That would not be a good ford. This is a really challenging site, but I mean this bridge is critical for recreational users to keep them safe and out of harm's way.
And you can see on the one side of the bridge there's quite a bit of erosion on the one side there. There's a close-up shot of it. Bridge decking. A lot of these bridges have some decking issues. Again, this isn't a structural issue, this is a maintenance issue. Bridge decking can be replaced relatively easily and will cost, but it's still work that would need to be done. And again, the 34.5 bridge, you can see again, more concerns with the abutments failing on this bridge as well. And some erosion there, and again, I believe this bridge is probably now too small for the crossing. Originally, it would have been, as the streams widened out over the years since this bridge was installed, it's...
Yeah, and the stream comes at an angle, follows the road, that's what's cutting it in. So you have to armor everything now, just try to save it.
Some bridge decking issues again. This bridge, the 34.5 bridge, would also need to be redecked. And the Wolverine, this is the bridge across the Wolverine. I believe this one is structurally okay.
Looks okay.
Yeah. And however, again, needs decking to be done. 37-kilometer bridge, decking needs to be done. I don't know if there's anything else structurally wrong with this one.
It's an easy one to ford.
Okay. 52-kilometer bridge. This was, I guess, from the flight 2 weeks ago. You can see, again, there's some structural issues here that's failing, and where somebody tried to use the delineator in a piece of 2x6 for an ATV ramp to get up on the bridge. So obviously, if somebody fell into that probably would pose a potential safety issue. And I think that was the last of the pictures I had included in this slide. I guess, Rob, you had a workup of numbers of a couple different scenarios.
I did. The one thing I wanted to notice or bring to your attention too is the actual road is actually in really good shape. And when a lot of people hear about deactivation, they think that road bed's gonna be just destroyed or whatnot. That's not at all ever what we were considering. We would just pull out the cross-stream culverts and the fish-bearing culverts, and away you go. If we did anything to the road, it would, why do something to a perfectly good, stable road? it's the structures that we're concerned about. So I know I haven't shared these numbers with Jason, but I just did it. So if we were just to bring this road back up to an industrial standard based on some numbers you provided me, we'd be looking at anywhere between 960,000 to 1.1 million. And if we were to use some of our liability funds with the goal to turn it over to, say, to the community or to Trails and Rec or somebody, we'd be looking at about 450 to 490,000. And then if we were just to strictly go in and deactivate it, it'd be about $185,000.
And so, Marlon?
Yeah, so if community was gonna take over some other use, or what we would do probably with our liability fund, is I gotta rebuild access in there, so we'd probably rebuild better access than what we need, knowing that somebody else was taking over, and then, cause you got two bridges that are showstoppers in there, the Wolverine and this 32-kilometer bridge. The rest, pretty sure with rock fords and minor works on the roads, people are gonna go fly by there, no problem. So we would fix up going in for safety reason, install probably a new bridge at 32-kilometer, better than we normally would, versus a little temporary. And then refix the Wolverine, redeck and do better rails and everything. And then when we pulled out, we would just leave it there if somebody else was to take over. So you'd have basically two good structures, which should be low maintenance barring a flood event for a good 20, 30 years probably, with the level of maintenance on there. But that would be only if somebody else was gonna take it over. If not, then we're just gonna go in there and just temporarily fix everything in there and rip everything on the way out. It's way cheaper option. But we have the ability to help if somebody else take over, to invest a little bit more, to leave it in a better state that somebody could actually maintain it.
So I guess that's the information we had for you for today. Unless Trevor or Ted.
I'm happy to answer questions about recreational end things, given what Jason just mentioned, but I think there's three options. The middle one is a real great one if there's, that would, I think,
There was an appetite for it.
yeah, if there's an appetite for it, the middle one is, be great for me, and I know lots of the hardworking volunteers that exist in this community and feel passionate about that road.
I want to thank you guys, because I know the first meeting I went to, it was kind of like, we were holding the bridges, and we're going to be done with this road. So obviously, you put a lot of thought to work into coming up with some options, and I know myself, I've talked to Wakanuma mainly, because they're out there, and they're not going to take over the road, but they have said that they would maybe put a piece of equipment out there that to do something minor on to keep it up. So if we can look at what you're doing and then involve, like you say, the community force and Kanuma once in a while, maybe it's a doable thing. It's something that we as a council should look at. Maybe have a bit of a town meeting on it and see what we can come up with, because it is important to us that getting back into that area. I know with sledding, most of these places, these creeks would be passable with a sled, I would imagine.
Well, you'd have to have a pile of throttle time underneath you to get past 32 and a half, unless it was a huge snow year. When I saw it, anyways, last winter, it was, I certainly wouldn't attempt to get across there at 32. And the Wolverine, that's a big piece of water, so I mean, those are two critical structures, I think, for year-round recreation. They need to be maintained, or they need to persist anyways.
Hey, does anybody, Councilor Scott?
If there was a partnership for those two crossings, do you have an estimate on the loan maintenance costs? Like, is there an annual, estimate for maintaining?
If you're just talking like snowmobile use and everything like that, what we would do is, what I'm seeing is that the first bridge you come to with the lockbox fan, I would put an all steel portable bridge. Maintenance cost, unless somebody bashes the rails, middle rails, it's really no maintenance. Barring a flood event, if flood events happen, then everything's off the table. The Wolverine, that's this bridge you're looking at it. We would then, put treated wood in. Normally wouldn't, but we'd treat wood, treated wood with low level use, 20, 30 years. Again, unless somebody crashes into it, no maintenance. So really, you know, the bridges, barring any kind of flood event, all fixed up, there should be really no maintenance unless people are wrecking it, running into it. So,
And I think Rec and Trail, we're gonna modify these bridges so the rails are higher, plus under Trails, and Rec can speak to it, Trevor, they're going to, it's not for Tundras, it's not for Toyotas, a trail is not designed for that. It's meant for recreation as some ATVs, side-by-sides, horses, hikers, all that kind of stuff. So there would probably be some kind of modification done to the bridge, the first bridge.
Yeah. So pedestrian-friendly rails would be necessary. The Snowmobile Club has expressed to me time and time again that they'd really like to be able to use their normal groomer to get back here. And with the engineer, they would just design a gate structure that they could use their snow or groomer in the wintertime, and then when it's when they're not grooming anymore, we'd close the gate, and I'd pretty well make it to about 5 feet to limit truck traffic and allow most, but not all side-by-sides, but most side-by-sides would be able to go back there. But that would be my intention, is to try to reduce wear and tear on the road, and I think by keeping it to recreational vehicles and not bigger truck traffic, we could keep the structures in a good shape for, well, as Jason says, a pretty big window of time, really.
yeah, if you don't get equipment with, you know, their tracks going across, chewing up the deck and everything, yeah, you won't have, it'll last, we have 20, 30 years, no problem.
And
Yeah, Councilor Scott, you
Oh, I
finish
just
off?
had one other question. What kind of timeline, when do you need to know when we have found somebody or not for the partnership?
I think right now, you know, we were hoping to do something this year. If you knew you're gonna have a partnership, we'd probably go in, install a temporary good bridge right off the bat and give you guys access this year. If you're uncertain of what you're gonna do, and I'd say we just continue the planning phase, get everything in place for next year, pretending we're gonna deactivate, so you have the season. But if you guys want access this season, then we'd have to have a partnership agreement. Then we'll go fix the first 2 bridges, because I need that done anyways before we deactivate and open her up for the winter, knowing that we'll fix everything up and you guys take everything over officially then next year. And then, but if not, then even if you guys in limbo for a little while, we'll just get all our plans in place, and then we'll probably tender out the work in like January, February to do it next summer.
But the road would remain closed.
The road will remain closed because we wouldn't be able to do the fixes, so.
Yeah, and I think we wouldn't need an alternate tenant in place at this point, like whether that be a road permit from the community forest or one of the other ones. We just have to have an intent or a commitment to move forward on that. That would help us.
Yeah.
Do you ever see a group of different, a few different groups get together and take over liabilities and things like this? Is there problems legally with that?
Usually it's one person that will lead it. Like in McBride, they're doing something similar. The Chamber of Commerce got together on the Door FSR down there, and it's been over 2 years of trying to get the land's tenure. So they finally just got it and they applied for it, but then there was a caribou issue there, so it stalled for a moment. But they were helping the Snowmobile and Rec Club, but they have to usually have one organization that has the funding capacity to maintain it. So a lot of times there are other people underneath them, but it's whoever's the main one that can actually guarantee the funds and the liability, basically.
And one entity has to be the holder of the tenure.
And so fixing up the bridges to get into 32 and then again to the Wolverine, do you plan on removing them on the way out? Will they be decommissioned, or will they be fixed up to maybe a little above and beyond so that they also last?
No, we would remove, the only 2 bridges we would leave in, it would be the Wolverine, this other one, because they're critical. The other ones, doing the rock forge, would just swale it in, and people should drive in and out without much difficulty. And then the risk is way lower. Then you only got really 2 structures you're really concerned about. Everything else, the road, very little work to deactivate that. There's a little bit of a slumping area, which we'll look at if it's just material, or we might just build a tiny little retaining wall just to give some time, but it didn't look too bad. But yeah, only 2 bridges will be the most we'd leave in.
And those bridges that you're looking at moving out, is that something that's historically been issues, or is it I understand the road is being, it actually doesn't require a whole lot except for that one area where it does slough a little bit. It seems to be that's the only problem area on that road, but are these bridges, is it possible to have them left in?
They're too small.
The other bridges other than the 32 and the Wolverine, you have to remove those?
Some of them are too small.
They're high risk that they'll blow out, like a high chance.
And if we're using liability funds,
On those structures themselves, yeah, those ones would have to come.
I think it's doable just on the first two bridges, because even if something happened, you can sneak equipment in, at least your own, versus trying to walk equipment 30 kilometers back.
If it was the last bridge on the road, we could just use liability funds to take out the last bridge and move the rest in, but unfortunately, it's the first one. So
Yeah,
that
'cause
causes challenges.
Yeah, liability funds are meant to remove the liability, but this is a way that government removes the liability by transferring it elsewhere, by fixing it up. But we don't want to leave a whole bunch in there knowing that the cost if something goes wrong back there, how it's a community that big flood event, you got 5 bridges now to deal with. You know, $1 million bucks easy, you know, you don't want to come up with that. That's just setting somebody up to fail in the future, right?
Just one last question. Are there other areas that could be maybe explored for funding? Anything tourist related? There is the geopark.
Potentially, things like the rural dividend fund would be one option to look at. There may be other funding mechanisms available that the community could apply for, but that's the one that comes to mind. And Tumbler Ridge has received funding under that program before. I believe there actually might be
Is there some kind of compensation for the caribou areas?
I'm not sure.
I heard some rumors. Because areas being set aside for the caribou habitat, I thought there was some maybe compensation given out to her that are affected by losing their areas to the caribou.
I don't know if we're far enough ahead in the caribou planning for this area yet to be fully up to that, but there was a request to set something up with our caribou team fleet, and I'll take that back.
Yeah, and we've been working with you guys on the caribou. I don't care if any funds that we could receive.
Yeah, for this type of thing, the rural dividend fund is kind of the first thing that comes to mind.
And so when you mentioned about the community forest taking over a forestry tender on that road, is it not Canfor's wood back there?
It's within TFL 48, yes, or portions of the road are anyways. So yeah, that's primarily Canfor's tenure, although other licensees, West Fraser and BC Timber Sales, sometimes operate under their through Canfor. But yeah, we'd have to have a discussion with Canfor on that. But there is a possibility that we could put and we have done it elsewhere, to establish a road permit tied to the community forest license. That doesn't necessarily serve directly the harvesting and obligations of the community forest for just this purpose. So it's a bit of a workaround.
Well, the reason I asked that is I'm wondering if there's a way of getting that cut box.
so I've talked to West Fraser myself, Canfor's and BCTS, and they basically said
They're not
they're
interested.
not interested in going back there.
Yeah, and they want to deactivate when we
Yeah.
go back
That's
to.
basically what, that's right. So Canfor is gonna piggyback on some of our equipment, because they do have some roads that they need to deactivate too. So if we piggyback or do it jointly, then they're not trapped by having all this deactivation in front of where they have to go. So those conversations have taken place, that they are not interested.
So Rob's done a
I've
lot
talked
of-
to Canumacol, they are not interested.
Yeah.
I've talked to the rail company, they are not interested. They can jump on the tracks right at 20 or 17, and so.
So my thoughts there is if the community forest was to take over a forestry tender, or maybe they could access those cut blocks. Those cut blocks could be,
They'd have to be within the actual community forest. So right now, because it is within Canfor's tree farm license area, that does provide kind of what we would call an incompatible conflict from the community forest expansion area. But I think if there was good harvesting options in there right now, probably Canfor would be wanting to keep the road open, I suspect.
If you were gonna look at logging back in there too, all of a sudden those bridges gotta be a lot better than what we're.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
whoever,
so-
if somebody wanted to go back in there, they'd have to upgrade that road back up to an industrial standard.
And that's the dollar value, the first one I gave you, like if we were to bring it right back up to an industrial standard of 960,000 to 1.1 million, and maybe even a bit more.
Yeah,
I guess the price of steel goes up every year. What, 15% you mentioned?
15 or 20 in the last couple of months now.
Yeah, and I think there was one of these bridges that was underrated.
Yeah, well, the Wolverine itself is not a really high industrial use bridge. It's a kind of weird design. And there's another bridge out there also that the steel, I would say, is suspect if we tested it right now. So
Yeah.
there's old kind of junk back there. Some good ones too.
Currently, a bridge right now is what you're saying, Jason, about $10,000 per cubic meter for supply and install. That
Per
doesn't-
meter, yeah.
I'm sorry, per meter, and that doesn't include even the site plan or it's, so if you need a 23-meter bridge, in some of these cases you do. It doesn't take long to add up.
You say Ministry of Tourism is starting to look at it?
Yeah, I understand. We've just had some conversations with them the past couple of days. And I think they're working on developing a plan to kind of address this, but I'm not quite sure where they're at in that process.
No, yeah.
So we can see if we can find more information out about that, and get them to contact you.
Yeah.
Or provide you the information.
Yeah, there's enough maybe players here that we can get everybody different a little bit and maybe do this.
Yeah, the big thing is just whoever takes the liability, or that's what your showstopper. I think getting it fixed up enough to leave it for you guys is not really the issue right now. It's the who can take over the liability of those two bridges, really. And the road itself is not much of a risk.
And that'll probably, staff can look into exactly what's going on there. Anybody else? Councilor Hop?
Yeah, so again, this is the tip of the iceberg that you guys had discussed at the first meeting. So this is the very first FSR we start talking about, and we look like we've kind of starting to come up with some solutions for it. Can you guys comment on any of the other Forest Service roads in the area that they're going to look at doing the same thing? This is just this year. What's next?
Well, we can't speak, there's Forest Service roads aren't the only industrial roads out there. There's road permits held by the forest licensees, so whether that's Canfor, West Fraser, the community forest. There's oil and gas roads under the Oil and Gas Activities Act issued from the OGC. Forest Service roads are just one piece of it, and that's managed through us. So as far as our Forest Service roads, Rob?
No, this is the only one in this area. We're very fortunate out in the Peace Country because a lot of our Forest Service roads have a primary maintainer on them. The unfortunate part about the Wolverine is the last 36 kilometers or 32 kilometers doesn't, and eventually these things fall apart. So, to answer your question, I'm not aware of any that are.
Any road that doesn't have a primary maintainer, though, is at risk.
Yeah.
It provincially, we don't have anywhere near the dollars, like operational dollars. I'm sure you guys talked last time. Provincially, we get $5.6 million to the entire province for operational. That's grading, snow plowing, doing basic maintenance. And so Rob gets $25,000 for this whole district. That's all he gets. So our ask last year from all the districts was somewhere around $30 million, and we had 5.6 to give out. So you can see we're severely underfunded. So our money first goes to communities, rural residents, and then try to hit some of the high rec value ones if we can. But yeah, so any road that doesn't have a primary and doesn't really have a community or people living on it, it's a high probability if a washout happens, you would be seriously looking at deactivating it, unless somebody else can come to the table.
Bear Hole, do you guys handle, you don't have
Those are road permits and
Oil and gas.
The Murray Forest Service Road, for instance.
Well, the Murray FSR, we were just talking about that on the way up. A few years ago, it was decided that Ministry of Transportation wanted to take it over now. Now, technically, it is an FSR on paper, but they haven't done all their surveying yet. But we have a signed memorandum of understanding that, yes, they will be maintaining the road, they'll be fixing the road. They've worked with CNRL that's out there. And in the meantime, we've traded. We've taken on 3 of their old roads in 3 different parts of the province. So we made that trade. So it's not a Forest Service road anymore. We're not issuing any road use permits on it. It is a MODI maintained road. And I've got the paper ready to roll. I've had it for about a year, ready
Sitting there
to
to sign
continue
off.
and close until I get the green light. And I think I might have got it today.
Well, like that's my fear is there's no industrial user beyond a certain point of that one as well, right? So
Right.
what's to stop us for having access to Canosa Falls if you guys come back in a year and say, geez, this plan fell apart. We don't have anybody to take care of that. We're going to take the bridge out. Now we don't have access to our number one tourist feature.
So when Ministry of Transportation did take that road over, that was the big deal about Canusa Falls and Monkman Falls or Monkman Provincial Park. That's the reason for them to take it over, because if you go on Ministry of Transportation's website, what do you see right now? Is this a picture of Monkman Falls?
Yeah.
So that was the big push for that road.
Okay.
Was that a capital? Sorry.
No, so that is the intent, is at this point, MOTI needs to finish a few surveys, tell us they're good, and do some paperwork on their end, and basically, we sign it over to them. And Rob's got the paperwork ready for me to sign, essentially.
It would be nice if you'd do that, because when I asked transportation about it, they say it's still kind of your road.
Well, it's technically, legally, it's still a Forest Service road until they finish their work, but they're doing all the management of it at this point.
Yeah, and we took over 3 of their roads, which we're monitoring now, 1 in around Mackenzie and 2 down south right now, so.
But if you get that paperwork too.
I would love to sign it.
And so is there any reason why the Wolverine Forest Service Road couldn't be taken over by Modi as well?
If they were interested,
Yeah.
I don't think they would be.
We try to get them to take over, like any community roads, we try to get them to take over, because we're not, forestry is not really meant for community access, really. But it's almost impossible. Like, we got so many roads that they only give us a small portion to maintain on their behalf. Doesn't even cover even the grading for the year. And we're constantly having battles trying to get them to take over more of these community access roads, but
We have several Forest Service roads across the province that service First Nations communities, small communities, rural residents, that sort of thing. And that's where Jason was talking about the capital road costs. So eat up a lot of our budget before we get to.
So if we were going to take over us or the community forest, and the community forest really is the district of Tumbler Ridge anyways, but if we were to take that over, and you guys will keep talking about transferring the liability, what is the liability? What is the portion that the ministry wants to get away from that they're concerned is going to cost the taxpayers the money? Is it that the bridge could wash out and now you've got to pull that out of the river 30 kilometers down the river, or?
Yeah, it's environmental and safety. So under a road permit, when you take it, government doesn't own it. So anything happens, that road slides, crashes, somebody dies, whoever's the road permit holder is responsible. So in essence, you guys are. On a Forest Service road where you got a primary maintainer that we assign, the liability still stays with the province, so they can leave at any time. So we got joint liability basically on it. But a road permit is officially yours. You're responsible to maintain all to the standards of the day, basically.
And can you get insurance for that? Like, is that, I have no idea. Like,
Well, through the community forest, I believe you would probably already have what you would need through that tenure. You'd have to talk with your community forest board about it.
I mean, obviously our concern is that it's never, from what I hear right now, it's never going to be a road for access for vehicles beyond this winter. Like,
Not unless another industrial user wanted to go in there
Yeah.
and upgrade the road, and then at that point it may be worthwhile to transfer the road permit to.
but at this point, we're talking quads and sleds and
Quads and
whatever,
sleds,
horseback
yeah.
or whatever.
Well, that's defined under the trail.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, that would be the other part is for us, we wouldn't be able to not call it an FSR anymore.
Yeah.
And leave the 2 bridges in there. Just under our obligations and mandate, we would have to take those out. But that would be the thing is, if we're going to give that road to somebody else on a tenure, that would be part of it. Is if at some point, those bridges were, failed structurally, that would be the responsibility of the tenure holder to deal with that issue.
I can comment on the insurance part of it. So if the district were to take it over or the community forest, they would be covered under the insurance that we have already. Most likely, it may require a small extension, but I don't think that would be a big issue. The big issue is that as wear goes on, if you are not maintaining it, your insurance isn't going to cover you if something goes wrong. So if you're not out there every year checking that bridge to make sure the bridge is where it's supposed to be and then putting the repair money into it, and then the bridge fails, that's going to be negligence on your part, and there's no way insurance is going to pay for that. So that's where the costs come into maintaining the ability to keep your insurance, is that yearly bridge checks and anything that goes wrong, maintaining them. So on a good year, maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just you send your engineer out there, which was 20,000, so you have 20,000 to go out and do those checks. But if there's something wrong with it, it can add up to.
Yeah, most engineer inspections for the level you're going to do there, you're talking $300 maybe a bridge kind of thing. So we do 2 bridges a day, maybe $500 for somebody qualified. And if you have somebody local in the community that knows engineering, that can do it too.
Kanuma?
And you're saying once every 3 years
That's our-
for
yeah.
these structures to be probably adequate?
Yeah, we inspect our temporary structures every 2 years for just our, what we call routine inspections, or if it's a permit, a good bridge every 3 years. We pay on average, and it's more or less just a visual inspection. They go snap pictures, they look underneath, make sure everything looks. We pay about $250 to $350 a structure. That's what we pay for every 2 to 3 years.
It's not bad.
And then when there's serious damage, then we get a detailed engineer cost, and if you need the snooper trucks or something, which you won't need, well, for the Wolverine you would, and they run up sometimes up to 2,000 to 3,000 because you got to bring a big truck in there. But those are for special occasions if you know really there's something wrong or a really old structure that you're concerned. But with light loads with quads and everything like that, most engineers are be pretty comfortable. Unless there's something physically seeing out there, it's a low risk inspection, a few $100 kind of thing normal.
And there may be people either within your rec community that would be able to assist as well.
My thought back to council is that, you know, this is like could be a kind of a really unique trail that we can, you know, advertise and try to sell, like similar to the trail the boys built up on the hill going over by the bald spot or whatever. Like, you know, that seems to be getting a lot of use and a lot of traffic and chitter chatter about it. Now, this thing is strictly set up that you will not run into a logging truck on this road, and you will not find somebody out there who's doing industrial work. You know, it's a good spot to take your kids out and let them out, learn how to ride spin wheels and that. Like, to me, it might be a real unique opportunity to provide something for our tourism base. I don't know.
I think we've got enough information here that we could work on something, and so we'll go tearing any bridges out.
We won't tear anything out for sure till next year. Give me that.
Or we'll put something else back in temporarily.
I guess
Yeah.
you know, my biggest concern would be that if this looks good for us and we do it for 2 or 3 years and everything works good and it's a couple $100 to get some pictures and engineering done on the bridges, then we have a flood event and then they come back in and say, boys, guess what? You got to take that bridge out now. We're left with that cost. They fixed it up and now that's a huge risk for us.
But we wouldn't be us telling you that. It'd be your growers. Well, I guess somebody else in government, but
Well, the Ministry of Environment may if
Yeah,
it
but it
fell
wouldn't
into the
be-
creek or
wouldn't be
whatever. Right?
Our compliance and enforcement staff might come
Yeah.
out if they were doing an audit.
Would they quad out there or would they have to drive out there?
I'd take a helicopter. That's how these guys did the inspection 2 weeks ago.
So just to comment on, definitely I think a unique opportunity to be able to get back there and not run into logging trucks for sure. But just warning bells go off in my head when you mention that. If it's a busy industrially active road from 0 to 20, and now Tom the Rage is promoting it as a really unique opportunity, and everybody and their dog is coming, maybe we then have significant safety issues with vehicles driving a radio-controlled road.
We're already going to have significant safety issues by taking the people that used to use that area and now sending them back into other industrial road areas where there already is traffic.
Yeah, sure.
So if we get traffic of 25, 30 vehicles back in there, that's spread out over 4 or 5 different areas. If that's now all that traffic is gone and all those guys are going to the Murray now all those guys are getting in the way of CNRL and the day was. And so to me, it's a 6 of one, half dozen of another.
I mean, you're just displacing users. Everybody needs
Exactly.
a place to recreate, for sure.
Exactly.
But just a comment from
Yep.
my, it's
Fair enough.
excellent opportunity, but 0 to 20 is still a busy spot.
Thanks for that. Gotta be a lot of thinking done here before we. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. And yeah, I guess.
A lot better than the first meeting.
Okay, and I guess you'll follow up with us when you.
Yeah, we'll have a conversation on this and talk with staff and just see where we can go from here. And say the full community for it and all that.
Okay.
We'll have a conversation with it. See what-
What cost would we be, sorry to cut you off there, but the cost of the 2 bridges, if you guys fixed everything up, you got everything done for us and you turn it over to us, we have a bad year, flood event, and they come in and say, boys, you gotta take the 2 bridges out now. Rough idea on what that would cost us to remove those bridges?
To physically deactivate them?
Yeah.
Somewhere, the Wolverine, probably 50 to 70,000 easily to deactivate that one. The first bridge,
Yep.
if it's on what it also portable, it would probably be only about 15,000 because it's gonna be just two sections. But the Wolverine one's on piles. It's a big one. It will be an awkward one to deactivate.
Worst case Ontario, we're looking at $100,000 if that would come out of the community if we, that's our risk then.
What did you just gave us a number for deactivating? right now?
Just
185.
The number I gave you?
Yes.
So I've got that number to deactivate.
185, yeah.
Yeah, at 32, I got 15,000. 35, bridge deactivation. Yeah, I put 95,000. I put.
And would the 10-year holder have the ability to walk away from this whenever they wanted?
They would have to basically request to rescind the road permit or relinquish the road permit, and they'd make that request to the district. But they'd be responsible for deactivating, and again, if they wanted to, relinquish that road permit to the acceptable standard before we would allow them to do that. But again, that would be taking those bridges out. And again, as maybe this is a long-term thing. We'll see what tourism does with their plan. Maybe other options present themselves as time goes. I'm not sure.
And just on that, just to make sure everybody understands, to get back to the Wolverine, if we went ahead with the best case scenario, you'd cross one temporary structure, but there's 2 fords that you would need to figure out how you would get back to the Wolverine. Just to make sure that's clear.
Yeah, you have to walk equipment. You wouldn't
You'd
have
have to-
low bed equipment if we had the Fords, because you'd have to, or temporary bridges.
But temporary bridges are
Yeah,
for
you're right.
the 2 structures. So
You can't walk through the creeks with the equipment.
You could.
Okay.
That's the only other way. You wouldn't be able to low bed through.
Okay.
You'd have to get a variance probably.
Long walk.
Yeah,
I got you.
just to make sure,
Variance,
Yeah,
but
it's a little dry.
so doable. Okay. Okay.
Thank you again.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the time. We appreciate it, and sorry for going over.
It was interesting.
Thank you.
Risk at this point.
Got nothing in correspondence, reports. The arena bleacher station. Discussion or information? Ralph,
Discussion?
seconder? In favor? Okay.
Yeah, so I'd just like to stick with kind of the initial idea, which is just to try it out. It's not to spend a ton of money on it, just exactly what you guys have got laid out there. Your intention is to do the top 2 rows in the C section to see what they are like and see if people like them. I mean, if people come back and say, hey, these were great, maybe we expand and do all the top sections, or we do the whole C section. But to me at this point, just to try it, to see what it looks like. And so what you guys have got proposed there, I think is what I'd like to see us stick with.
I like the idea too, and I think that comment, Mr. Wall was to be fighting up with those 26 seats, I think it's 26.
Yeah,
We'll probably do on the first year priority seating for elderly, pregnant, and stuff like that. And if becomes that popular, and then council can take a look at installing more. The nice things with these 2 is even mid-year, it won't be a big issue to bring in more if that's where you want to go.
I know myself, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I seen it in other arenas, and that's why I brought it up. Thought we'd give it a go and see if we could do it here. And then I wouldn't want to do the entire arena, and the reason is that some of that arena gets used by people. We don't have an indoor running track, so there's quite a few people that train in the bleachers. They run the bleachers. We run the bleachers with the kids before practices and stuff like that. So, that regard, I wouldn't want to see the whole arena, but see how the first 26 go or 25 go.
So we had another question. Joy, do you remember how much those wall lockers cost?
Approximately $500 for 4.
Yeah. So we were looking at, instead of putting them in each locker room, because it was going to add up to about 16,000 in total, we're going to put them, in between the red lockers in the hallway. There's those little areas where you're going to stick them out there. How does that sound?
So there'd be you get like 16 wallets or something in there or something?
Yeah,
I'm in a 4-tier. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's 4 7 by 8 inch or something, just
Yeah.
wall size. So it'd be a little tier that you could put in between your hockey lockers. So you could put one outside of the one locker room and the other locker room. So we were thinking we could probably get 4. So you'd have 4 here, 4 here, 4 here, 4 here.
Because if we start sticking 8 in each of them, it gets really expensive. Like we're looking at more than $10,000 for these things.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So this way, it's accessible to everybody, and then also if you for the most part, people can lock up the dressing rooms anyway. You can just completely lock them up. So those times where you can't, then they'll just be on the outside by the
Just
other
put a
lockers.
quarter in it and
Yeah.
lock your wallet up or whatever.
Yeah.
So, is there anything you need to this?
No, this is the plan. If council wanted to change the plan, you could, but if you're happy with it, we'll go ahead.
We okay with that?
On the wallet lockers, were they in the budget as well?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, 7.2, capital projects, fire inspective services building, district office, building envelopes. Page.
So page 16, first design was the one that we had previously, that the community, it wasn't received well at the community meeting. So then we did page 19, which is to kind of tie the current colors that we have, that red and blue. And then there was one new color design with green on page 22. So we don't need any decisions today, but some ideas of what council's thinking.
My personal preference is red in the middle and the red that we've got here. And, I think that other one looked just red to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that I got anything against orange.
Council does come to a point where you say, okay, we want to look at this one a little more. There's always the option to go out for more color schemes, but if council does decide on one that you like, we'd get a material board made up for that one so you can see the actual colors. Because you take a look at the red and you don't know exactly what it's going to look like in blue, so we get a material board done up and see what it looks like for certain.
This is just for information.
Information, or if you guys are ready to provide direction as well.
I don't like the red. I'd like the red to stick with the fire hall. I think the uniqueness of the red should be on the fire hall, but I don't like
No, I don't like green.
Oh, yeah, I don't know, I like the uniqueness of the fire hall, so.
I just think everybody thinks it's on the ridge or this kind of reddish. A little bit of red kind of keeps that here.
I always thought it was pink myself, but.
Same thing, peaky pink and red.
I didn't want to run down pink. I don't know, is council, you have something, Mike? Yeah.
Just wondering how we're going to decide on it. The one that I cater to is on page 19. First, how do we gonna make a motion, or how do we choose?
Make that motion. Well,
Yeah, you make motions, which then go to regular meetings, but this is kind of just a council preference thing anyway, it's not. a
So
decision.
motion's not necessary to make it
No,
this day?
a motion is a good idea, yeah, make a motion.
motion to bring it to the
Yeah.
So to me, I'd like it broke up a little bit more. I don't know, like when I think of our town hall, like, I mean, look out through the windows here. It's got like the gray along the bottom and then the secondary color and then the pink or the red or whatever you call it below. Like this here to me looks like a tin building. This looks like, again, all of the pictures, they've got the one mono color tone of the building. To me, it looks like an industrial shop more than anything, like tin siding.
That's what we want to do, is some kind of siding.
Yeah, we
Rather
can-
than stucco.
It won't be stucco, we can break up the siding, it just increases the costs. Add another color will increase the costs.
I mean, to me, it's super important to keep the uniqueness of what the town hall looks like. And you see tons and tons of pictures of Tumbler Ridge on the internet or tourism photos, and a lot of times it's with the town hall and the backdrop and the mountains in the background. Like, you know, we don't want it to look like an industrial building, right? We still want it to have its unique look to it, but that's to me why I'm not fussy over any of the designs at this point. I think I like the building materials that we're using, just not fussy on the design myself. I've always liked the rock that they did below of the windows over the last few years, where they cut that bank out, put the windows into the rock below. I thought that was a nice change to it, but
Yeah, the infrastructure committee that was struck before, they done a lot of work on this, and I'm wondering if, I mean, along with materials, everything else, and you're right, materials can make a big difference, but I'm wondering, where did that all go, Councillor Scott? I mean, we had a lot of stuff done there. And really some pretty nice designs, and keeping in mind, I mean, the designer for this place won awards for these type of designs. So I think we're all in agreement that we don't change that too much, but there is and Council, Mr. Clickash, he was also in that committee, so there was a lot of input on the type of materials we should have for longevity, the type of windows we should have, it's all there. I'm wondering where that is.
So that's all been decided, we're just talking about colors now.
Okay, so we'll break down to the colors, so it's, gotcha.
And unless, well, I say that, I mean, council can make other design changes if you want, nothing's set in stone, but there's been decisions made all along the way that what we're down to now is color scheme.
Well, I think it'd be a great draw for the town hall meeting. What they want. And I know what I want, but, I mean,
We already had a town hall meeting. Last
yeah, we
one
did,
had.
and they told us they didn't like that.
They didn't like that, so when they came back, but there was other one there, it wasn't just red, so I'm not sure if it was the gray one. The red, there was two options, or somebody brought it up. I'm sure it's the same ones we have right in front of us. Somebody had a pamphlet there showing people.
Remember which designs were at the town hall? We only had the color.
This one, but there was one more that showed different front entrance designs.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
But
So
I
there
think,
was, yeah, different designs of the front entrance, but the colors were on the color patch that we had, the color swatch, I guess.
Yeah, we took one down, and there was
Just had
still
one.
one left up. There was two different colors available. Town hall. Because one was really, I think it was the red one that came off the table.
Yeah, nobody liked that.
Yeah, but I think that's what came off the table.
I can't recall.
I just remember the front entrance.
I don't know how we're gonna do this.
Yeah, we've got 3 designs here. We can go back with more designs. If you'd like one with, multicolored, we can do that as well. I think with this, the plan is to raise that rock a little bit higher, but you can always lower that rock to add another color. It's council's choice.
With the rock, actually, with the rock included, there's two colors. Well, I don't know. What you wanna do?
if I had to vote on it, I'd say the one on, if these ones, I like the one on page 22 with the green in it myself, but I'm not fussy on any of them right now. There's not one that I'd go stick my neck out for and say this is the one that I really like, so.
You wanna see different?
More?
You want to see different?
Like say, like the different coloring along with it.
So have the color symbol there.
Okay.
Have another color right down the middle.
Yeah, I don't know, I mean, that to me looks modern. The one on 3, it looks like a newer modern design, but does that take away from the uniqueness of what the building was originally supposed to look like, right?
At the town hall meeting, were these other options provided as well, like on page
The-
19 and 22?
19 and 22 were designed as, with
Alternates.
feedback from
Okay,
town hall meeting. So 19 was to try and have this a similar color scheme as to what we have right now, but I think this blue is trying to match that blue and this red is trying to match that red.
so I just have a thought. like being consistent with what we have right now, but what if we were to take the red and continue it underneath the windows? Like the rock face is great, but that's probably enough expense. But if we continued with the red underneath the windows, just to break up that aluminum look or whatever, I think that would look a little bit better. I think if we go with the green, it completely goes away from what we have right now, and then it's gonna blend with the trees and the background and stuff like that. So I'm just thinking that would, break up that color of the gray.
Probably wouldn't be that much increase in cost. Because
No.
It's gonna be cut anyway.
So underneath the windows all to the ground or underneath the windows to the rock?
Underneath the windows to the rock. So it would carry the red
That would divide it up.
around, yeah, and then the gray would still be there. It would be the top part of the building.
Did you want to, because I think the red's top now, did you want to keep red top and blue on the bottom? Or did you want to flip
I'm
it?
looking at this one on 19.
Yeah,
So here, just continue the red along here, under the windows,
okay.
around.
Yeah.
That's just a thought on,
Well, I like that idea.
If council's going to take it to another town hall meeting, I'd say you spend some time getting those other options, so when they come, the community can look at it and give you a closer or more accurate view of what they're actually looking at. So we can go back and get that designed. I was just saying, Councillor Scott, because if you add red from the windows above, then it'll be the same as what we have now. Whereas if it's red from the windows down, it'll flip it. It doesn't matter to me either way. I'm just,
I see what you're saying.
yeah.
I don't know.
Slide in that water.
I don't know, I'd say we could send it back to staff, let them get us 3 or 4 more options to look at. See
Yeah,
if something jumps out at you.
Okay.
Okay. 7.3, bylaw interactive report.
Which one are we on now?
7.3, bylaw interactive report.
Is it one? Yep, thank you.
Is that the information that, I wanted?
For discussion?
Okay. Go ahead.
Just looking at the financial, the budgetary implications and and what is the goal here is to combine the dog catching or animal control in with,
No, this is just a report of what the bylaw enforcement officer,
okay?
what he has done up to this point.
So when we get to the bottom of page 33, we see the, if that was combined with that position, it actually exceeds the amount that we normally would pay for an animal control officer.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering where we stand now after the vote, our last meeting.
We got it here somewhere, I think.
So as far as our animal control services, so right now, animal control is provided during business hours by our protective services department. And there's no after-hours coverage.
So if the bylaw control officer was to receive an after-hours call, that would be a call.
It would be a call-out which we'd have to pay overtime for. We don't have that in the budget right now. It's something that we could move towards with the budgeted funds, but at some point, I would imagine that we would go over that amount, yes.
Over the amount that's been, allocated for the budget, for the animal control.
It might not, it depends. The issue is that you're dealing with call-out rates, which have a minimum amount of time, and it's double time as well, or time and a half, so it'll add up fairly quickly.
So it seems we got the 7.3 and 7.4 together here.
Yeah.
Because they do affect each other. And I wanted to bring something up, and that's with the cannabis bylaw that we just put in last week. That is gonna be a big stretch on our bylaw enforcement officer. Because he's the guy, not RCMP, the bylaw. So, bylaw enforcement officer is gonna have to do that. I don't got time now to do the job. And they sure won't have to do that.
Don't understand that the bylaws can be enforced by the RCMP as well.
Well, they probably can, but bylaw enforcement is bylaw enforcement. That's a bylaw.
Bylaw, the RCMP can enforce the district's bylaws.
That's smoking, yeah,
And alcohol, district bylaws.
yeah. But I'm telling you, it's gonna put a big load, and all the other communities are considering this. That it's gonna be, and they're actually thinking of putting, if you wanna buy a cannabis business, you're gonna have to pay a lot more for a business license than a regular business license because of the cost that's gonna be incurred by the communities for this cannabis, and that's the bylaw control. So, I think we gotta put a lot of thought into this because I think we're gonna be loading somebody up really good. And you look at the number of tickets, 380, I think that's a fair amount of work myself, I thought. I was surprised at that.
Is it 380 tickets or 380
380.
interactions?
Warning tickets.
It's not interactions, warnings.
So we had 86 verbal warnings for business licenses? So you call somebody and warn them that they didn't apply for their business license?
That's correct.
Okay.
So I'm just curious if we've got that information on us for
Regarding,
last week in regards to contracts. You're still looking for one?
we've got the minutes from the meeting, which is what we keep the permanent records of. So you're
No, no,
talking about
the contracts when I came into the office there for the meeting.
which contract?
Don't catch it.
Do we have the contracts? Yes,
You're
we've
still
got,
looking for one.
no, we've got the contracts from the animal control officer.
Three?
We only have one animal. You're talking about the bids?
Yes.
So we've got the minutes from the bids and that's what we store. I don't know if that third one has been found, but we normally just store the minutes of the openings.
Scott?
I was just wondering, is the bylaw still complaint driven? Or when we had the full-time bylaw officer, was it just something that they were doing, like when they're,
So there's no set on this bylaw is complaint driven and this one's not. We do community sweeps. So for example, let's go into so on traffic bylaws, you're gonna have a mix of some that are complaint and some that are not. On the unsightly premises, I'm probably gonna guess that 95% of those are not complaint driven. Animal control is most likely complaint driven, not always. On this report, this is the bylaw officer's interactions with them, so I'm gonna say that 95% are complaints. When you get with an animal control officer, a lot of the issues that they're going to be dealing with wouldn't be complaint driven. They do the 2 hours a day of monitoring the community. Business licenses wouldn't be complaint driven, they're administratively driven because we see which businesses haven't renewed. So there's always a mix of what's complaint driven and what's not.
yes.
So then you're also mentioning, Dawn, about the cannabis regulations or whatever. So we still haven't heard back from the government on what their plan is for providing some of that flow-through funding back to the municipalities. And I'm in full thought that at some point, we're gonna get some share of that tax revenue that comes out of that. I mean, we've written letters on that. Lots of people are talking about it. So to me, that's where my thought is yes, I agree with you. We're gonna have to enforce it more. And that's gonna be a larger strain on bylaw and the RCMP. But I'm hoping that some of that funding that we're gonna get from it, business licenses or some tax revenue or some amount of sharing is gonna cover some of that flow.
They haven't committed to anything.
They haven't, no. But also in the beginning with the cannabis bylaw, I mean, the RCMP is gonna be out trying to figure out what they're supposed to do with it as well, too. This is such a new,
When you talk to them, they don't think it's gonna be any big deal on their shoulders because it doesn't affect them all. That's the way they're addressing it right now. I think down the road it will affect
Mhm.
a lot, but right now they're saying that they can't see it being a big deal.
and like, so the bylaws can be enforced by, in our municipality, they can be enforced by a bylaw enforcement officer, Enzo or whatever, right? And then it can be the deputy fire chief, which we don't have one anymore.
No, just the fire chief.
And like when Brandon Braun was here, he couldn't enforce bylaws?
No, he could do fire inspections and he could enforce those, but not bylaws.
Okay. So two of them, the two guys we have, and so that nobody in public works can do that either. Like Doug Beal or none of those guys can step in or make any of that calls. Okay.
Yeah, I understand the cannabis thing and how that affects and everything else. But what I'm on a problem with, I'm not too sure what we voted on at the last meeting. Because the vote was to award that a certain individual the authority to pass tickets on behalf of the district. That's from what I understand, that's what that vote was for, which was defeated. But at the same time, the same gentleman was doing the job, had gone out and purchased, and see, I'm having trouble separating the two because we're looking at, from what I gather, we're looking at adding this on to this, to the first position to our, and I mean, if I'm getting this wrong, then somebody correct me, but.
Well, all I'm saying, the reason I said, okay, we're talking about both of these is because bylaw enforcement is affected. I mean, because we don't have an animal control. We voted that down. And I think you got some cannabis in there too. It's really big, building a big, we tried, we did try using bylaw to do stuff we had to before, and it was so expensive, we decided not to do it. I don't think that's not probably not in the report.
No, because it'd be impossible for us to guess. The issue that you're gonna run into is that if you say the bylaw enforcement officer is gonna deal with these things and then he hands his card out and says, well, anytime you've got an animal issue, call me. Well, every time he gets a phone call, if he picks the phone up for 15 minutes, he's got at least his 2-hour call out at double time. So that's the issue that you're gonna run into in using a union employee on after hours call outs, is that anytime somebody calls him, you can't, you could, I guess, when that employee reaches a budgetary level that you don't want to go across, you can say, okay, well, you're not taking these calls anymore, make sure your phone's turned off after this certain point. But until that point, if you say that you're on call, then you're on call, and when the calls come in, you're gonna have to compensate that person for the work.
I know in the past we have done that.
I would imagine it adds up really quickly.
And it was way more expensive than, at least with the contractor, you knew you had, this is what you're spending on dog catching.
So I can say that in all of the models that we looked at, there was no community that did after hours coverage through their union employees, and my guess is exactly for that reason, is that it would add up way too quickly.
Just to finish off there, I mean, I remember that, we actually went through the dollars and cents, and it made far more sense than we did. But I'm kind of but again, I'm kind of puzzled as to where exactly do we stand with the individual who was a successful applicant for this job. Because from what I understand, we actually hired him. He was out doing the job.
We've exercised our exit clause in his contract.
Yeah.
So he's no longer working as a contractor for the district.
So he spent money on WCB, I'm not sure what other things are related to the job. Mm-hmm. And what happens there?
I'd have to look into the contract and see what the exit is. There would have been a notification period. So the notification periods and exit clauses and contracts are generally put in there to ensure that if you do have to exit, that there's a certain amount of costs covered so that you're not put in a liable situation. And I would imagine that that's where we are.
And I guess there's just that vote was actually probably one of the biggest surprises in my career here at Town Hall. because there was 3 questions answered. Both of them were answered very reasonably. There was and yet the result was, and I never found it. I didn't see any reasoning for that vote. That's a 4-3 vote. I understand that. It's a done deal. But there was never any explanation. All of a sudden, I mean, there was 3 questions asked. There was 3 answers given that were perfectly legit answers, and should have definitely should have resolved any question you had. But yet the vote went totally sideways on something else. So I still don't know the reason why we're not doing this. Why we're not going with like we did before.
Because I called the question and it was 4-3.
Yeah, I know, but like I say, it was the questions that were asked were answered. So again, a little mystified. Money, common sense, decency toward an employee. I mean, those all should come into this. If there's something else I'm missing, I don't know.
Actually, I think we're on, sit out here and discuss, we're going to vote, so we've had that discussion. That's my comment to that.
Oh, no, I just want the reason, that's all.
You want each individual council's reason? Because I voted against it. You want to know my individual reason? Is that what you're looking for? Or?
Well,
I don't think we should be.
I'm not getting into it.
We can. I mean,
We don't have to. I mean, we asked these questions before and got upset that we were asking in regards to votes, and this was discussed, and we're not doing that.
This was we had a chance to properly talk about different issues. This one here, there was no reason given. Like, the questions you had were answered.
Well, I'm actually still waiting for some information.
I'm not gonna start rehashing now.
My understanding, Rob, did you vote in favor of it or against it?
Oh, I voted in favor of it. I mean, I knew the financial, I knew that what we had done in the past, and that's what my vote was based on.
The only reason I'm asking that, if you wanted to bring it, you correct me if I'm wrong, Jordan, if you wanted to bring it back for reconsideration, it has to be done by someone who voted in favor of it, as I understand it, not against it. So that's the only reason I'm asking. So if you wanted to bring it back for reconsideration, put it on the agenda at a future time, and deal with the issue again.
Which I could bring back, but there's no point me bringing it back if I got 4 councillors that are gonna vote against it again. So.
Well, that's assuming that there aren't any new arguments or information that comes up. That's all. All I'm saying is that can be handled that way.
So back to the bylaw enforcement. My personal opinion is I would like to see the bylaw enforcement that we have in our community take care of the dog catching at this point. Reason being is part of it is well, I think it's going to save money, especially if we don't allow it to happen after hours. He's on a contract and he can work up to a certain amount of time. Stuff that happens after hours, we'd have to have conversation about that. But you also look in here, he has some ability to do stuff, and he does a lot of stuff that I didn't even know he could do that. Like, I didn't realize that he could contact the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia and find out who ownership of vehicles are. I didn't know that anybody could do that besides the RCMP. You know, when you have somebody who has that ability, who's dealing with an issue like dog catching, perhaps he can't locate the owner, he knows where the house is at, but he can go pull the license plate and find out who the owner is. He has more ability to do that job, and he has more resources at his disposal than what somebody who's in a contract basis is. He's within the community. He knows how to get a hold of Public Works and Doug Beal, and if they had to do something with that, I mean, in my mind, that there may be some things that work together.
And I think during this term, we strengthened our bylaws so that a bylaw officer has more power. Like for abandoned vehicles and stuff like that. He can do something with them.
Yeah.
But I don't think we had that before in our bylaws. Right?
Which, sorry?
That we didn't have a whole bunch of muscle and being able to go and pick up a car that was abandoned on the side of our streets and tow it away.
We've got an easier ability to do that. Yes.
But we, now,
That's correct.
but we didn't have that before.
Yeah.
And we've done things like that with this council to make it easier to do that.
What Councillor Howe was talking about is the conversation that I'd encourage council to have. What service level do you want to provide? So you see in the reports, I think it's pretty much almost split down the middle in the Peace region of who provides after hours animal control coverage and who doesn't. But for the communities that do provide after-hours animal control coverage, it's done through contract the same way that Tumble Ridge does. So if you want to provide after-hours coverage, here's the model that works and here's the cost. It's actually almost the exact same cost in every community. If you don't want after-hours coverage, then we don't.
And that after-hours coverage is the 30,000. Sorry, Alan.
Oh, no, that's okay.
That's correct.
It is the 30,000.
I was just wondering if we have any information on how many after-hours calls we did have by the previous contractor. We do?
Yes.
Was there considerable call-outs in the evening?
Considerable interactions, yes, and calls, yes. But I'd have to find out where the breakdown is between a call-out and just finding a dog running on the
Because that
street.
would be valuable information when we're putting costs to this.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just one last touch.
Yeah.
And just a change to a job description of a bylaw enforcement officer. That's also got a committee consideration.
Not for this, though. This
For
is
dog?
already underneath the umbrella of what he's asked, what the bylaw enforcement officer's asked to do, where we're get into changes if we started requiring consistent call-outs. That's where we're gonna have to have discussions and negotiations. You can't always force an employee to work overtime, and when you only have one employee who can do a job like that, you can't. If you say that you have to be on call all the time, it becomes indentured servitude at that point, right? So.
so that's where we want to end this, just for information now. Okay with that? Okay, thank you. Okay, discussion items. Continued funding of the Tumble Ridge Museum Foundation. And the first part of that will be, the questions are going to be asked on the referendum in October. I gotta tell you, I was not in favor of having C as the A and B, I'm in favor with, but I wasn't in favor of the C till I had a conversation with Mr. Wall today, and I really think it should be there too. I hope, I'm really hoping that C doesn't, like, the Tumble Ridge Museum is important to the community, but we gotta find a way of making this it's working for the community, not for.
Sir, just one thing, I know you weren't here on the last PNP, and that's why we carried it over this one. My understanding is this isn't held anyways, even if it was a C, the inbound council can still get funds, my understanding from Mr. Wall.
It'd be a lot of pressure on them though, wouldn't it not? If the restaurant says it's not funded.
They wouldn't be legally bound, and yeah, I would imagine they'd be under pressure. It depends what the vote came out. If 75% of the community says don't fund them, I'd be hard pressed for the new council coming in, and that the more that number goes down, the less pressure.
Becomes a political decision.
It's always a political decision, yeah.
I just want to know if everybody else is okay with those questions.
So council, I'd encourage you guys to get your discussion on this done today, because it'll be forwarded to the next regular meeting, and at that point, the question, if council's gonna have a question, needs to be finalized, because we need to get ready for the election and have the ballots printed. So I'm gonna have to give council a deadline of August 7th to finalize the question.
Should be able to do that tonight. Councilor Scott.
Will it be one question on the referendum, like that or will there be some options?
I think what you see here is.
So they'll be able to choose between the three?
One of the three.
Okay.
If you choose two, I think that would go your ballot, right?
Correct.
On this.
Yeah, and I don't think there's overlap where you could choose two. Maybe I'm wrong if somebody else sees it, but do you see any combination of two that would work? I think that they're all mutually exclusive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think.
So the other part the council should look at is this preamble. Are you comfortable with this preamble? Should there be more positive words about the museum? You know, maybe something that the museum's contributed to the community.
Personally, I think it has to be.
So let's talk about what to include. You know, the district, we've got the factual information there. The district has donated. In 2018, museum was denied because that's what council wanted to see. So is there a sentence we want to put in there about the positive contributions to the museum?
I would like to put in there that the museum has been a very important part of this for many years. I don't know how many years it is, 18 or whatever it is.
So we could put a sentence, since its founding in 2015, the museum has been an important part of our community. The district has donated, like that?
Yeah, that's my thing. So I'd like to see.
So maybe if council just wants to pass a motion to add a positive sentence about the museum's functions into the question?
If everybody's okay with these questions.
Yeah, I'm just not comfortable with talking about just the museum because, and that's a conversation you and I have had before, that it really isn't just the museum that we're not funding. It's the Peace River Paleontological Society or whatever, right? Like it's more than just the museum. When you talk to the people in town and they talk about the museum, people say, yes, I want the museum and it's important, and I don't understand why you guys just don't run the museum, and why is it ran by paleontologists, and why is it, you get all these conflicting views, and then you get the other side that talks about we need the paleontologists to be to add the validity to any of the finds that we have in the area. So to me, I'm just not comfortable with it's really not just the museum, right? It's
See, we've always said that we do not fund paleontology.
Mhm.
That 200,000 that we give them is supposed to go right to the museum.
Mhm.
I agree, as we discussed there. Paleontology, I think, has got to be taken out of this, and that's got to be, we got to go after the province on that. And I think we'd have the ground to do that if they weren't tied into the museum. But, no, I agree fully, but all we're talking about here is the museum, we're not talking about paleontology, because we don't fund them. That's the way our grant is given out. It's for the museum, not for the paleontology, right? And,
But
I know the argument's there.
yeah, and there is a lot of in kind. Like, I mean, the building is given to them. That they use a whatever it is, the value of that building, $3 million building or whatever it is. That next year, the way I understand it, Ridge Elementary School is going to be at capacity. They're actually kicking Strong Start out of the kindergarten room or the whatever it was used to be the kindergarten room. But now that's all going to be occupied by elementary students, and they are at the point where they may have to bring in modular classrooms for the elementary school next year, like beyond next year is the way I understand it. So I mean the argument is there that we provide a lot to the paleontology side of it, giving them the building, and I mean they've done a ton of renovations to that building, some of it for the improvement of the building, some of it not. But
So I can just, because this is something that just to put on council's radar, because you brought it up, the capacity issue at Ridge Elementary is something that should start coming up on people's radar. Puskupi is in capacity issues right now, and they talked to the school district about modular. There's a 10-year wait in order to get a modular, so you have to build on. And my understanding is that there's a 100 in Surrey alone. They need to spend $500 million to build schools in order to get the kids out of modulars there into the schools, because the modulars, like when we were younger, aren't what they do anymore. So a modular now costs somewhere about $600,000 to $800,000 to bring it up into this region, because it's got to have the proper codes and insulation and stuff like that. So completely different topic, but something for council to be aware of, because those easy solutions that used to be there aren't anymore. I guess one of the modular home makers went bankrupt, and now there's just a huge backlog across Canada to get them.
Subject for another meeting. we do have a meeting coming up with the school.
Yep.
Because actually, when I was in the, I'm going off on a tangent, but when I was in graduation, there I was sitting with a bunch of school people, and I asked that question, whether half of them said, yeah, it was, and we had a problem. Half of them said, no, it wasn't. And the principal of the school,
Terry.
yeah, she said that she thinks we got an issue we should be dealing with right now. We should be talking about, but not right now. Anyway. Yes, Councilor Scott.
On that, is Claude Gallabah, that like the old school, is it, like what would it take to put that back to?
They never do that. I asked them
Okay.
that already.
Okay,
That would be the game plan. They'd either be able to destroy modulars is what would be first.
okay. And then the other thing is, if we're looking at question B, continue to fund the Tumbler Ridge Museum Foundation with no conditions of strings attached, that would be where we would possibly build it right into the OCP, so that, you know, this was resolved once and for all.
Line item, yeah.
Mhm.
Kind of like the library.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, you know, we're not talking any, mentioned $200,000 here. I think we proved this year that there are cutbacks that can be done over there. It doesn't have to be a 12 months of the year. That it can be a 6 to 5 months of the year thing, and I think those are conversations that we've got to have with the museum, because to have people sitting over there for all winter, and I don't see a whole bunch going on over there. I have a problem. And when we can always open it for, if there's a delegation comes in that wants to see the museum, we can always find a way to get it open so they can get in there and see it. But anyway, that wasn't what I was talking about either.
So the motion that you made, your worship, to add that sentence wasn't seconded or
Okay,
voted
I
on.
think that. I don't think we're covered. Any more discussion on it? All in favor? Vote.
Okay, then we just need a motion to forward that to the August 7th meeting.
Okay. I'll make that motion too. Favor? Vote. Okay. Okay, the second one was what we're going to talk about at this meeting on the 25th.
I think.
23rd. I think myself, I'd like to see the payroll policy in the museum separated. And I'd like to see us look at cheaper ways to run the museum. That's right. And the other thing is, it's, when we sit down this meeting, I'd like to be able to say, look, we're not here to talk about natural stuff. We're here to say, what are we going to do to get to the future? That's what I want to talk about, because all we ever, whenever I sit down with them, we always talk about what this guy did several years ago, and it gets us nowhere. Because we're here, but we agree on it. So, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to come in there and state those ground rules, and then I want to pursue the fact that we could be trying to look at separating the two and kind of modernize it, just find a better way of doing the museum. And I'm not saying, I'm not putting a dollar figure or anything on it, but I just know that we can do a better job. And there can be a better job done over there.
And modernize it is what, you know, I see. I mean, that to me seems like the same place that I took my kids to 4 or 5 years ago. And the last time I was in for with the First Nation groups were in there when they did the blessing and that stuff, it seemed like the same place. They had a couple of new exhibits, but it has the same flavor to me. And to me, if it's a major tourist attraction, you need to have something that changes in there so that people want to come back and rediscover it and check something out. And you know, they have to be open to those discussions or some ideas, or perhaps they have some of their own that they're going to throw at us and say, geez, this is something we've wanted to do, but you know, we need this type of funding, or we'd like to change the school to look like this. And just to have that open conversation with them, and you know, that to me is super important.
And just what you said there, this is something we want to do, but we need more funding. That's the type of discussions, you know, once you come down with your base funding, so, okay, we want to put some interactive stuff in there, but it's gonna cost us extra. And then that's the time to bring that to us.
Something to discuss, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just with their board members, correct, this meeting?
Yeah, just a board member. I think so.
That was the invitation that went out.
It's
And another thing I'd like to have available for the meeting when we have it is some look at their budget and their numbers. So we had some talk in there about wages and where money went and this and that. I'd like to have that information provided for us as well when we get in there.
So we have their audited financials, but I think you're looking for something different that we don't have. We have their old master plan, which does break out to some level where the funding goes, but their revenue side was just so, it was just so unrealistic that it's not worth analyzing. So I can get you the information that we have, but I think if you're looking for this amount of money was spent on this program, I don't have that information.
And maybe you don't, but to have to send that conversation out to them to say that's what I would like to see. I'd like to see the breakdown. I'd like to see how $50,000 that we give to them, you know, for this to keep open for this time period. Why $50,000 works for these 3 months, but it also works for the 3 months in the winter, and it also works for the 3 months here, and so forth, so on and so forth. I'd like to see how that breakdown is. Like who gets paid what, where does the money go? They need to be totally open and transparent with us. If they want to see, you know, from my point of view, like, you know, we've tried it for 3 or 4 different ways. We're going to get everybody in the same room. It's time to lay it all on the table and see what we got. And then, you know, there's a lot of stuff that's been talked about that you can find the truths to it more, you know, a little easier.
So a monthly expense breakdown?
Yeah, absolutely. And in depth, right? But I'm looking, I don't need to know that employee 7 got this much, or whatever the name is, but to have some idea of what the employees within they're getting paid to do that, right? So.
Well, and we need to define too what the museum means to us, and what, like, either a description or a list of the criteria that the museum should be delivering, and then, you know, with costs, with what they have been providing, we can maybe develop that list of responsibilities. And then if we have that breakdown of what the museum is doing, and where our funding needs to go and what it can contribute to, like, we need those things defined once and for all. And then if, you know, we know how the paleontology comes into it, and we have that breakdown, that's what we could take to UBCM in the fall. And yeah, if we have like what the municipality is willing to do, what the museum's been defined as, and what we're contributing to that, and we have a magic number to ask the province, like, maybe that's where we can.
If we've got an agreement, we go to use BCM, there's gonna be a lot of ministers who are gonna wanna hear it, because they're
watching.
asking us to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're in a good position right now, even though it's taken a lot of battling to get here, but we're in a good position right now to fix this. I think we can do it, and I think we can get provincial funding.
Well,
There's been some pressure put on them.
And a lot of these players, like the people that are actively involved in the museum and the paleontology and the geopark, I'm sure they have ideas of how we can all work together too. So.
They've offered help.
Mm-hmm.
The BC museums have offered help. The tourism people have offered to help. You know, they don't want to get in the middle of a fight, but if we can get past that fight, then they want to help.
Well, I think locally too, like all of the groups, everyone wants the same thing. So.
Okay, I'll leave it at that.
So what council wants me to request the museum to provide a monthly expense breakdown which highlights what was spent, employee wages, and so maybe what was spent in each service area. Just want to make sure I get this clear.
I guess why I agree with this is that we offered $50,000 to run that place for 4 or 5 months,
Mm-hmm.
and they said that wasn't enough. They had to go find some more. So, you know, $50,000 to run that building for that long, and then all we were asking is to open the door so that people could walk through and have a look. Not putting on any education, just not doing anything, but just opening the doors. That's what I'd like
Right.
to see, why $50,000 wouldn't do that.
So, and that's why I just want to make sure I'm clear here. So, what I have written down here right now is that council wants a monthly expense breakdown of what was spent in each service area and the employee price breakdown. So let's put that to one side and you can decide whether you want that or not. And then there's another question of and asking them to provide a expense breakdown for only the opening of the museum, only the opening of the Discovery Gallery. Yes.
The expenses of the museum. I don't know. You know, if you're just the curator, I guess it's gonna be expensive.
Sure. When thinking in terms of the people that would be on board, if there's going to be people coming in, visitors, and so on, would we not want to have somebody there, one of the paleontologists or whatever they decide who would be the appropriate people to be able to answer the questions and be able to really do a number with regards to information and all, everything that would come with the questions that tourists are going to raise. And are we going to be able to do that, or are they going to be able to do that in a matter of $50,000? That would be my question and concern. If we really want to put on a show and all the bells and whistles that come with it, is that enough? Maybe it is. I don't know.
I don't think that's what we requested, but that's what they tried to supply, I guess.
Okay.
So right now I've got 2 requests from council. It's that monthly expense breakdown to try and get an idea of what they're spending in each service area, and which includes the employee breakdown. And then there's also the second request for what are your expenses for only opening the Dinosaur Discovery Gallery?
Yeah, so my idea or thought process behind that is that they may be doing something that they think council wants done. And that's why if they can show and say, hey, we do this, I don't know, tour up in wherever, and we think that's what you guys want done. And we go, no, we didn't want that done. And so you have a better understanding of where the money is going, and take one good crack at this and figure out where it's going and start checking the things off and say, yeah, they need this amount for lights for their portion. Okay, that makes sense. They need, so much to keep it open 40 hours a week through the summer. Yep, we can all check off on that. If we wanted to do 40 hours in the winter, we got some discussion on that. We're not going to check that off yet. We may be able to check off, 70% of the things that they spend their money on like that, and realize, okay, that amount comes to $120,000 for a year, and everybody agrees on that portion. You know where I'm going with that? Like, we all want it open during the summer. There's nobody in here that said they did not want it open during the summer. Like, you may be able to pick off some low-hanging fruit, and then you have the harder discussions on the stuff that that it has more contention to it, like open in the winter hours, and maybe a paleontologist is the curator or whatever. Those are the stuff that we can set aside. But if we can take some of it and say, we know that we can give you this type of funding all year long. That's why I want to know where the money goes. If that makes sense to the rest of the council, I don't know, maybe I'm rambling on again, but that's where I'm going with it.
That's what I got.
And I understand, I just want to make sure council's comfortable with what the question's going to be, and it's going to get you the information that you want. So if council is happy with what I've read back to you, that's what I'll ask. If not, just provide me further clarification.
Good to me.
Okay.
Okay, Christmas ticket donations, okay, this is one that I brought up. we trying to accept something like this? I have an issue with it. I just don't think that we should be taking something that somebody would never given money to. It can be seen as kind of like a bribe. You get delegates, you pay the money. And I know, talking to other communities, they don't do this. They don't accept stuff from groups that they fund. So I would like to send it back and say, thank you very much, but when it comes to the Goose Fest, we'll pay our same price as everybody else.
I'm totally agree with that, that's why mine are still on my wicket. There's no plans taking those, so, it's actually not code of ethics.
Yeah,
It's in a charter too.
Yes, I agree as well, Your Worship, and the question that I had marked down looking at that was, is this not a gift to council members, and under presently our code of ethics, on page 42, it's a gift of favors, and the intentions may probably are to do good things, and so the intentions are all right. But with regards to the money, that also amounts to $470. That's not including wives or whatever and so forth in terms of the normal prices. So I certainly agree with the fact that we shouldn't accept that. I think it's against our policy that we've got in place now. So that's my vote.
I was just wondering though, on other events that we've, like I know the Emperor's Challenge, send everyone a t-shirt. When we had the ministers here for the inauguration of the geopark, there were riverboat rides. Like, those things kind of fall under this as well, do they not?
Yeah, there are riverboat rides for the ministers and that.
Yeah, but there were certain council members that were invited on the
I went in the helicopter, more or less to kind of showcase stuff to the kind of outworking.
But those are at a cost as well, plus we're supplying businesses with, like, we paid the certain service provider for those trips. So I do agree, but I'm just saying, to me, it looks like Gristfest is always being targeted and making an example of.
I'm not trying to target anybody, I'm just saying, I appreciate it. I'm not targeting anybody, I'm just saying that it shouldn't be done, but that is a gift. To go with a minister on a helicopter ride, say that's Crusoe Falls, we even flew down the road and said, look how bad that is.
And then we pay those people in turn, the riverboat provider, the Ridge Roaders. So again, like, I'm just trying to make a point. Or when the Emperor's Challenge gives each councillor a t-shirt, should we turn all those shirts back? Those are gifts as well. So we're paying for a service and showcasing, and that was the intent there was.
If you're taking it that would be going after the Goose Fest, Councillor Huff.
And I don't take it as that. So I had some conversations with Councillor Kirby over this as well, and I asked her, I feel uncomfortable taking these tickets. And the way Councillor Kirby explained it to me is she said, well, I think their intention here is that they want us to go down, because they say a lot of you don't attend Gristfest. I'm one that does not attend Gristfest. I hardly ever go. It's probably been 5-6 years I ever went. But they want us to go, and it's a backstage pass. It's an idea to go see what they're doing down there, show you where your money is going, so you see what they want to showcase for you. This is not with the intention to go down and sit in the crowd and watch the music and hit the beer gardens. This is more of an intention for you to go backstage, see what's going on, let them explain to you, this is why we need the stage set up, this is why we need you to do this. And when it was explained to me that way, I understood it better, and then I was thinking, I might utilize that to go and do that. I still don't have the intention to go down and watch the music festival, it's not my thing, but that's the way it was explained to me, and I felt comfortable with it when it was explained that way. If it's against the code of ethics to do that, totally understand that. The other thing, when we voted on giving them the money, there was not one of us that ever had the intention at that point to say, geez, I hope I get a free ticket out of this. That was never part of the conversation. And they chose to say, hey, this is something we want you to come and see. Let me show you where your money's going. take a minute to go along with, I think it's Miss Cosgrove, is her name, and let her show you around for 5-10 minutes. That gives you the opportunity to go in with the pass. And that side of it, I understand where she's coming from with it, and I could do it, but.
Do you,
Oh, I was just gonna say too, for, regardless of whether or not the tickets are accepted, I think it's really important that mayor and council do see how many, people that come into town, just for that event. And this is the 17th year that it's being hosted. And it's been a huge challenge this year with limited funds. It used to be paid people's jobs, helping put that on. And those jobs are still there, but there's a huge, a limited volunteers putting it on this year.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way I took it. It's more of an educational thing where you go back and you get to see behind the scenes, some of the problems that you have, as well as a lot of the good things. And I also compared that with what happens with the community forest, because we always sponsor and we get tickets. But with those tickets, we usually either give those away or we get rid of them, because we have that policy that you cannot take them. But I think this is more of an educational thing than that other scenario.
You know, guys, council doesn't have to do anything. This is your policy. I'd say you probably don't need a ticket to go down and do a tour. You could probably just contact me. I could organize a tour for all of council if you'd like, and make it at a time that's suitable for them. Council could also probably just contact one of the organizers, and I'm sure that they'd find a time to show you around. But it's not up to administration to tell you whether or not you should accept these tickets. This is you guys that do that.
Do we need to make a vote on whether the tickets are accepted or not?
I guess that's up to each council. I kind of like the idea of tour, rather than take it. I would like to see what.
And you know, perhaps that could be passed on to Grizzfest for next year or in the future, that they say, hey, here's backstage pass access for a couple hours to come check the event out, see what's going on. It's a little different than a weekend pass that allows you to attend all the events and all the music and stuff. Perhaps they could do something like that for anybody that's part of it, right? But
I'm uncomfortable with it, and it's always probably returning my tickets, but it's up to council how they read our policy. Because if you say that, they'll go right to that. I'd hate to send Governor General in Riverboat without somebody that can go along with her. But that, to me, that's working. That's doing the job of the council. To go listen to a music festival, I don't think that's doing the job of the council.
Hockey games.
But going to the back and seeing what they're talking about and understanding their challenges, you know, maybe we could learn something from that. And I plan on doing that. I plan on spending a little bit of time to go checking it out. So
I like the idea of a tour back there. Okay, so we'll just leave it at that, and we can all do whatever we feel. Okay, BC Hydro meeting. We were wondering what we were going to talk to them about at UBCM.
I'm not sure where this one went, but this might have, I forget, but is this perhaps to look at why we're not able to sell power to Alberta, the regulations of why we can't have wind parks up here so we can sell the power to them rather than always through BC Hydro? I thought that was the one topic that we had for BC Hydro, so.
And to put more backing behind.
There we go.
I've sent out a request to the wind companies to see what issues they want to bring up. And I know what the issues they're going to bring up are. One is more programs under the SOP, Standing Offer Program, which is likely dead because of Site C. But what really bothers the wind companies up here is BC Hydro's connection costs. because BC Hydro doesn't allow an external source to come in and do their connection costs. They have to do them internally, and the wind companies feel that BC Hydro prices them incredibly expensive in order to make sure that these projects simply aren't competitive. So there's two issues that's constantly bring up. One is the cost of connection, and two is the ability for companies to work together in order to have one connection between two, or placed in an area where they can share costs. And they feel that BC Hydro doesn't take that into account, again, because with their regulations, BC Hydro says build your connection here, so they have to build it there, and then BC Hydro says, by the way, we're the ones who are going to be building it, we'll bill you at the end.
Would this be an opportunity then to talk about joint ventures between companies? I know like years ago, TELUS and BC Hydro used to have some kind of an agreement like that going into, so is this an opportunity to kind of open up the power from the windmills to something like that?
What do you mean?
Just where they partner and when they're, like if two companies were needing a connection, because there's supposed to be another huge windmill project on the Red Willow area. I don't know if it's in discussion or whatever, or tentative.
It's mothballed.
It's mothballed.
It's totally mothballed?
Yeah.
All the major wind projects, with the decision to go ahead with Site C, all major wind projects are mothballed.
Okay.
My guess is you're going to start seeing a pretty large exit of wind companies out of British Columbia. Companies like Brookfield, who has the Red Willow project, they'd been maintaining it in the hopes that they'd be able to get that power, and without a significant upturn in the BC economy, LNG electrifying their plants, there's just not going to be that demand that'll outstrip Site C's production for quite a while. So the big question on whether or not wind is going to be around for construction is whether or not BC Hydro continues with the standing offer program.
And like I say, I don't understand why we've got great wind in Tumbler Ridge. That's been explained to me many times over. We have a great spot that they can do this. I don't understand why we can't have a project like the Red Willow, where the power could then go and be sold to Alberta, who's trying to get off of coal power. Alberta does have some wind opportunities in southern Alberta, but not like we do up here.
So those discussions are taking place between the governments, and I think they've progressed. They had been progressing quicker because we had two NDP governments talking to each other. Those governments aren't getting along very well right now, so I'm not sure if that stalled out their discussions. But I also know that there is generally a push for major investments from a province to be made within the province. So it's difficult for the Alberta government to say we're going to make an investment into a long-term power purchase contract and send that money over to BC rather than then build and keep that money within Alberta. So there's no doubt that we could supply that power for cheaper. But when Alberta looks at it, they say, well, we're in a slower economy than we'd like to be. We're not going to send all this money across the border to BC. We'd rather employ and
provided they're selling the power to BC Hydro. But if the company's based in Alberta, like an energy company is based in Alberta, and they set their energy windmills up in British Columbia, they'd have to pay a tax, I'm sure, on the power that goes over there. But the power goes through an Alberta company back to Alberta. I don't quite get that. I mean, to me, it's no different than natural gas, right? Like, there's a lot of natural gas companies that are based in Alberta. They pull the gas out of the ground here and they ship it to Alberta and sell it, and they pay a fee when it goes across the border. Don't understand. Like, it's BC Hydro. It has to go through BC Hydro. Any power produced in British Columbia has to go through BC Hydro.
No, so you can companies can strike that deal with Alberta on their own. It doesn't have to go through BC Hydro, but Alberta, I don't think, from what I've seen, the Alberta government is not willing to work that way. They only want to work with that one entity, and that's through BC Hydro. So it's legally possible to happen, but it doesn't look like Alberta's choosing to exercise that option, and they want to work with the government and with BC Hydro.
That to me would be the discussion to have with BC Hydro, is to get a little more clarity on that, because the last wind meeting that I was at, that's what I understood, is that BC power produced in British Columbia has to be sold through BC Hydro. You can't sell it privately.
If you can find somebody to directly buy your power, you can. It's just
Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Really?
It's not economically feasible. Nobody's going to buy direct power from a wind farm.
So why don't corporations in British Columbia do it for themselves? Like, why don't they set up wind wind parks or something, or why can't we buy the power
Because it's intermittent.
directly from the wind companies?
Because it's intermittent.
Because there's
So-
no holdback.
Just because the nature of wind power is intermittent, so if you are relying only on wind power, you're going to have an issue. So that was, so that's one of the issues. The other issue is to get to the point of having this major investment. So I mean, you're aware of how much it costs to build a wind farm. They're incredibly expensive. The financial backers won't do it without a purchase contract that they can depend on. So a financial backer is likely not going to back a project that doesn't have BC Hydro guaranteeing the purchase. Because if a company comes and says, well, I've got this company who says they're going to buy power from me in 20 years, the financial backer is likely going to look at that and say, I have no guarantees this company is going to be around tomorrow, let alone 20 years from now. And that's why it generally flows through that way. So it's not so much as it's a legal requirement. It's just for all the different parts of it, it's very difficult to get a project off the ground that isn't sold to BC Hydro. And so there is that ability to sell cross-border without running it through BC Hydro, but it doesn't look like, one, you're not going to get the financial backing if it's sold to a company, and two, the Alberta government seems to not want to purchase it that way. They want to purchase it through the government.
Okay.
What about transmission lines? Oh, transmission lines.
So again, that's another investment now that you'd have to make as a wind company in order to get that, and that's why it just becomes too expensive. But I can add that.
But there are good questions, and I think maybe the discussion with you has to be.
And finding out where those discussions are too would be good, so I can add that on.
I would think of the wind power as something consultation on center ice design.
So on this one, Your Worship, we've got 3 designs there. Just looking for what council wants to do. So keep in mind that our red line will not be checkered like that. Our red line will be solid. So how would you like it? And the idea for the ones that are not facing this way is that they'll face towards the stands. I'm aware that our ref circle's on the wrong side here for that, but it won't be put in that way. Just to stop, preempt the question.
These reusable?
Yes.
Do you have a cost on these?
Yeah. Is it,
The large center ice is $1,518 before tax and shipping. The smaller one on the back, $351, and the larger one on the back is $785.
and they should last, you might get 5 years out of them if everything goes well, but they're meant to last 2 to 4.
Okay.
So you get a number of seasons out of them.
Is it kind of like just a large decal or something, and then they got to kind of melt the ice down and peel it off at the end of the year? Or?
Yeah, and just because we don't have, like, where these will get damaged is when you have those, when you quickly need to get the ice out and you want to make sure other people are getting in there. With Tumbler Ridge, there's no demand for our ice right after it comes out, so you just cut it down to about where these are, you let it melt and peel it out. We should be able to keep these for a while.
I like the first one, the big one. I think that looks good.
I put the big one too.
Yeah, that's my preference.
You're okay with that? We need some direction.
Yep. You vote for the big one. Your Worship. Just a vote.
Oh,
Yep.
need a motion.
Yep.
Wanna make a motion?
Sure.
You're the one that brought this.
Make a motion that we go with the TR Raptors, the large logo, 27 by 12.5.
Second, Councilor Trelka. Any more discussion on it? All in favor? Vote. Bank, health insurance, office staffing. I think, Scott, you were about this?
I was just voicing concern about businesses in town having issues with staffing, and I think we were just, I know the bank has recently visited town, and they're going to be doing a membership drive and talking about increasing service levels, not necessarily hours, but they may readjust those to better service Tumbler Ridge. The hub, I'm not sure. I just know that there seems to be a turnover, and my concern at the time that I brought this up was, you know, I think somebody's planning on retiring soon, and I just don't want to see another service leave town, so I don't know what we can do to.
I'm not sure that it's in our realm to talking to a private business, staffing, any other issue that they run the business. I imagine they've got a plan for when Joe D does retire. I just can't see the council getting involved here.
Do we do all our insurance through Hub here in town locally?
The district's insurance?
Yes.
No, we use the municipal insurance authority.
So none of the vehicles like are
They run through Hub, through MIA rates. I'll have to check with you.
Okay.
Most of our insurances run through MIA. There may be things that we do through the local insurance company.
like through the trucks we have that run on the road and stuff that may be through Hub?
Yeah.
Okay.
Vehicle insurance would be.
Anybody else? I just don't think there's anything that we can do. Except personally, we can help with that. And personally, we can help. Okay, council attendance records. This, I brought this because, mainly I brought it because of my expenses for traveling and all that. But then the more I thought about it, the more it'll show new councillors that there is an expectancy of being at council meetings. You should have that in your mind when you decide to run for council. I don't know how everybody else feels. Input.
Those are some expenses, so should we expect that you have to travel wherever for no reason? Like, don't get me wrong, I mean, other jurisdictions, which I've looked up many, it's usually the mayor and up to 2 council out of province, and the mayor and up to 3 councils in province to go to FCM and all these. Like, to me, when there's a whole bunch of people traveling to UBCM and the FCM, for me to go to me, it's just another added expense to the taxpayer. I mean, the information comes back from whoever goes down, whether it's just councillors or if it's the mayor and councillors. The information comes back, or we do have discussion about that. To me, it's people. To me, it's a holiday. Not on all events, but when people go and stuff, I don't think I need to attend an FCM when there's already 5 people going or 4 people going.
And that, you know, that's all in our policy that we set up, which we look at. But I'll tell you, you learn a lot and more from just talking to other people from other councils and talking about your issues, their issues, how they handle it. I know I learned a lot, and other councils that have been on these meetings with me say the same thing. And if you talk to any councils that are attending these things, they all feel the same way. You know, we sit in this little box here. Boy, we need a mine, we need this, we need that. When you go out to, say, a Vanderhook or someplace like that, or NCLGA, you find out that there's a lot of issues out there. And there's things you can work together on too. And it is good for a council to get out and talk to other councils. Just because we all seem to think that, but this isn't the way to do it. It doesn't make any sense until you talk to somebody else. Say, well, we tried that, but we found out that didn't work. It's hard to explain, but I think it's well worth it.
I know what that is.
But I agree with you in one way that when you get a trip to Halifax and that like that, then maybe there should be some limits on how many people go. So, you know, but that's something looking into our policy. But what I brought, but then the other part of that is our meetings. I mean, it takes time to do this job right, as we all know. And I just think the people that are thinking of running for this position should know that it takes that. Councillor Howe.
So you're thinking about like having like something, I don't know, like there's a page at the beginning that says, you know, Councillor Mackay for the, whatever, for the year of 2017 attended 72% of the regular council meetings,
I think
or?
somewhere even on our Facebook or account here, that some people that are interested in that information can come and get. And I'm not saying I just saw a thing in the paper from the street where they had it all, each councillor, and did for the 40 years. And, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something that if I want to make my mind up who I'm going to vote for, I go down and have a look and see what's going on. And I think that information should be out there. And for the people that want to run for this position. Because it's a lot of time. Councillor Strauss.
So would you be tracking the percentage of council meetings that each of us attend, the PMPs, like whether it's NCLGA, UBCM, like is that like full attendance record like that?
Yeah, I think on Sophie, it's already got travel expenses.
It has the funds.
I think council's talking about two issues here, and administration can do both. So just let me know. There's the council meetings, like the council. They're all council meetings. So the council meetings, these are PMPs, regular meetings, special meetings, the scheduled meetings, and so we could do what you're saying there and do that. And then as far as attendance at other council, what you want to call them, functions, like NCLGAs, UBCMs, associations, that's tracked on your expenses, but we could create a list of every meeting that councillor's expense. That's not difficult, because we've got everybody's got their own folder with every expense form, so we could go back and see what meetings those councils members have attended.
Attended or paid for?
Paid for,
right? It's not
paid
attended,
for,
'cause
not
it-
attended, that's correct.
There's a big difference there.
So that's what we could track. We could do that. We could do one report with the council meeting attendance, and then we could do one report that has the list of meetings that council member has attended on behalf of the community and been compensated for.
And those ones are kind of optional.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's why I think it makes,
Yes.
if you put it both in one, I don't know how that works, but two.
Because that would give the list of expectations, like the council meetings, PMPs, those shouldn't be, optional. Like it does show the attendance there for the things that we are supposed to be partaking in. The other out-of-town meetings or functions in town too, those are optional.
I don't know how much I'd be in favor for them tracking to say, hey, here's what this councillor made this meeting and this meeting and that meeting. I mean, the minutes are there. Anybody can pick up your book of minutes and say, okay, was he at this meeting? Was he at that meeting? There's stuff that goes on in our lives. This is, I have a full-time job beyond this. A lot of you guys do as well. Some of you are semi-retired or retired. But, I have a full-time job, and sometimes when we schedule some of these meetings and the type of work that I do, I'm on an on-call basis. I'm not able to make every meeting. There's other instances of circumstances that come when people get sick. They have diseases, they have injuries, and you can't make it to a meeting, so that, my attendance rating comes down to 68% this year, and that gives somebody the opportunity to say we should vote that guy out because he only has attended 68% of the meetings. You have no idea what's going on in that guy's life besides that one time that you came down to town hall to look at that thing that says, yeah, he was here for 68% of the meetings, he should not be involved. That doesn't mean because you didn't attend the meeting, you haven't reviewed the minutes, you haven't gone over the videotape, you haven't picked up your package, you don't have information that you're going to provide the next time you come back in. To me, I don't know, I don't see it. Also, there's other people that on council that have different lifestyles that they're able to leave and go on vacations for long periods of time, and they missed 3 or 4 meetings in a row. I think, Jordan, correct me if I'm wrong, is there not something in the community charter or something that says if you miss a certain amount of meetings or 3 in a row that you can get voted out or something like that? Is there not?
If you miss 3 regularly scheduled meetings in a row, you are automatically disbarred from that rest of the term as on council, and then the following election as well.
There you go. So I mean, to me, that is one of the things, unless you had notice or something, is that correct?
No, so it's not notice, you need to be, you need a leave of absence from council. So council has to vote to grant you a leave of absence. So the only leave of absence we had was Mayor McPherson was granted a leave of absence. So when that happens, you're no longer taking on duties, and you're no longer being compensated as well. Like your stipend stopped during that period.
But that side of it too needs to be communicated to those that run for council, that come in on council, because I was not aware of that until we had the conversation you and I had, and with Mr. McPherson, Mayor McPherson's thing as well.
Yeah.
So that has to be communicated to people as well when they come in here. I didn't know that. I was not aware of that. I had a death in the family, was not able to make a few meetings because of it, and Mr. Wall called me and told me, hey, listen, you need to be at the next one, or you could be in this situation. So I made sure I made myself available for the next meeting. So to me, it's got some real downside to it as well.
I just have one thing. I mean, I really don't. I mean, somebody wants to track my attendance out of it, but I think staff have better things to do than make up an attendance sheet.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's in our package. We're always on Mr. Wall himself for not getting certain things done or adding to his plate, but now we want him to come up with an attendance record. I think that's just a waste of our staff time. That's my personal opinion.
No, if we're gonna do one for one, do it for the other. Because, I mean, the same thing goes with the UBCM. I mean, there's been times we've went to UBCM and we've had meetings lined up just chock block with the Ministry of Mines, with Minister of Energy, and everything. And that has taken up a lot of time. And a lot of times, half the time you're not even at the conference, you're at these meetings, as well as with DAWA, Tech Corporation, and all the way down the line.
Right.
So that's the opportunity you get to actually go, and as that was my portfolio at one time, I'm extremely interested in that. Especially when the development of the wind power and things like that. That was a really exciting time for Tumbler Ridge, and it was a great portfolio to have. And you'd hate, and I wouldn't, even though that was in my portfolio, any councillor that had the opportunity to go down and take a look at that, they should be able to do that, because it is education. And at the same time, you're talking, I mean, you're at the groundbreaking, before the groundbreaking. People that want to come in here, and then you're meeting with the minister the very next day and have a chance to advocate for those people. And I personally been involved with something that brought $250,000 into town, just by being there talking to just in the meeting, and here's a grant, put in for that, and we're successful on it. So there is a payback.
Councillor Casey.
Thank you, Worship. Well, just another point on as far as attendance of the meetings. When you start talking about the FCM and you start talking about UBCM and NCLGA and so on, it all depends. A lot of it depends on the attitude you got going in. And one thing that it does, it affords a group of people with basically the same interests, different parts of the world, on different subjects, dealing with either national items or local items, municipal items, and so forth, to have some real good, solid discussions with regards to whatever the agendas happen to be. And hopefully we're all responsible enough to take a look at the agenda and say, yes, yes, this is one it's worthwhile for me to go to. And the other ones, no, not this one or whatever, you make up your call. But in terms, and certainly elected members of council, I believe, are smart enough and sharp enough to say this is not just a free trip where you're not going to accomplish anything or you don't have a plan or whatever. And we're elected to do those things. Also, the educational aspect of that, when you start talking about national issues, that's another element that comes into your overall, hopefully, expertise and so forth. If you want to treat it like a holiday, then that's on you. If you want to go there and go to the workshops and make sure that you have the discussions, we've had more informal discussions amongst council members after the formal stuff has been done. That happens irregardless of the location or whatever type of meetings there are and so forth. So you take a look at the agenda, and if, as an elected representative, you feel like going to that because it's worthwhile for you to do that, then you should have that opportunity to be able to go. Doesn't matter if it's 3 or 7 or 1. And that's your call. And if you're gonna play the game, then that's on you. That's on all of us. I think it's critically important, especially for new elected representatives coming in. Critically important, in my opinion.
To add to what you said there, it just happened, like, we get down there, we get to have that caribou discussion, and we end up in the big hall, and I don't know, 3,000 people there or whatever. And if I hadn't got up and stated Northern BC's position on caribou, they would all thought that guy before me from Surrey or wherever he was from, said that's why we don't like people from Alberta. They would have thought they all felt that way. So this, you can make a big difference if you want to be part of it. And like Dr. Casey said, yeah, you can go and be, it's a holiday, or you can go and be involved. And that's most of the people I've been with at these meetings have been involved. Go ahead,
I was just gonna say, going to the UBCM and going and seeing the ministers, we have made a difference. Like, we've put Highway 52 back on radar, where I don't think it was in the 10-year plan, and they are discussing it again. We've achieved the MLT designation of the Murray River Road. So there's things, and I think when you have a unified council going to those things, it makes a bigger difference than if there are one or two. So, you know, I think we've accomplished a lot. And these open discussions too, where we get to, you know, voice our discrepancies and have that open discussion. I'm really proud that nobody on this council has quit. Like, we haven't had a by-election or anything like that, so that's a huge accomplishment as well.
Okay, well, we've had our discussion on that. I
Provide direction. We talked about 2 reports, so if you want those reports and
Do
provide
we-
direction.
we want to push this any further, or are we happy with what we got?
You know, the other thing, Your Worship, that come when we talked about absenteeism and so forth, I mean, we're all responsible adults, and we've all been elected to be here and so forth. So if any one of us is having an absenteeism problem relative to coming to council meetings or do whatever and so forth, because we're just too damn busy to do it, then there's a decision that has to be made. And that is, if you can't do both and show up, quit one. Quit one. End of story. Doesn't matter whether it's this one over here or whatever. The whole idea is that we miss out, and I believe this, we miss out a tremendous amount if we don't have a full council. Can't happen all the time, but we need everybody's input. It's worth that. So.
Okay. Okay, Number Ridge Public Library wage discussion. Now, I'll start this one off. Things have changed, like we've got a higher minimum wage, there's some taxes that we're gonna be getting, I gotta get it yet, but probably tax time. I don't wanna see cuts at the library. The library, the way it's running, every time we go in there, there's people in there using it. I think we have to look at this minimum wage thing as something we've got to have a serious look at and maybe change the way change our budget. I don't know how the rest of the council feels about that. That's okay.
Now, the last thing I want to see is any hours being taken away from the library and be forced to close, because it's been, I think attendance has been going up over the past few years, and I think that's solely due to not only the renovations, but the different programs that's been taking place. And it seems to be like whenever there's money that has to be found, you know, you get a little tired if that's the first place a lot of communities and a lot of cities look at is the libraries. When actually, it should probably one of the last things you should be looking at. So that's what I mean, that's my feelings, and I think that there has to be adjustments paid because of that minimum wage.
Well, I think it's pretty,
Go ahead.
I think they came in for the looking for $3,000 to increase their minimum wage. My understanding is $3,000 to bring up the cover their budget for the 3 minimum wage employees.
I'm not sure.
Not the number it was $3,000
It's 3,000.
to cover the 3 minimum wage employees from the wage that they put in their first budget, and then when the government decided to do a minimum wage increase, the $3,000 would cover them for the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's what it was, yeah.
That's good. I just thought we'd have a number there.
Well, so, do you want, make a motion to bring it back to our next council meeting for discussion on that?
I'll make a motion to bring it back in regards to minimum wage increase for the public library at $3,000.
In favor? Ready, PRD municipal planning participation. I don't know if you noticed the other day, I'm not in favor of this at all. They want to change it, the real directors want to change it the way they're talking. We shouldn't even have a region district, because it takes, all they're doing is being spectators. I think, I mean, if there's a problem, they say they gotta pay a certain percentage, that's not right. We'll change that. We don't change who's voting on it. We change the amounts of people. But I'll tell you, I'm not gonna go be a spectator. I'm either part of it or I'm not. And we changed that when I first became here. This council changed that we had a full participation. And they want us to go back to where we were. And everybody else will do the same thing. Well, I'm not interested in it.
I agree. I think we should remain a voting voice. We're, trying to do coalitions and unify everyone. And to me, this would be taking a step back in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I have the same thing. I remember when this came up, when we all first got elected in, you folks who were reelected, back then you guys were just a seat warmer, and then you explain what we were looking for, and you had support to do it, and then listen to these folks come in as a delegation. And I looked at your face when we first started talking, and pretty sure you were hindsight of what the discussion was going to be about. I wouldn't be in favor of just being a seat warmer there. I think we lose out it too as a municipality if we do that. So yeah, I hope that obviously we have to have the decision done on the next meeting anyways. So hopefully there's full support council of staying a full partnership.
I've been working at being a big part of it because it benefits us now. So that's what I'll continue to do. Councillor
I think the amount of money that we pay to be part of that group is not that big, and the amount that they're gonna knock it down by is not that big of a decrease to lose the amount of voting power that we would have in the area. What's the budget of the Peace River Regional District? $52 million or something like that? To me, I think if you have your vote in there where you can get the share of that money, that 10,000 or 15,000 or whatever it is we pay to be in there it's a no-brainer.
I know the first thing that they did.
Transfer station,
Because,
gym.
yeah. I know that I'm happy. We are great for us.
Yeah.
I'm fighting there all the time, so. Yeah. Glad that council's got the same opinion I got.
Yeah, and wasn't it set up partly, the whole part of the regional district is to get that revenue from the stuff that's around the area, like the well heads and the rail lines and that, so that that money can stay in the region for people that utilize the stuff that's in the region, like, all those people that are out in the rural country areas and this and that, they still utilize services, not so much in Tumbler Ridge, but I mean, they do in Chetwynd and all these other places, but Tumbler Ridge as well. They come use our recreational trails. If we're gonna go spend maybe $100,000 to remove bridges on in 10 years, I mean, it's the same thing, right?
They pattern energy, they pay tax into Dan's area. And they sure don't use their rec center. They
That's
use
right.
our rec center.
That's right.
And so that, this other stuff makes up for some of that.
Yeah.
Councillor Casey.
Thank you, Worship. The other thing that it does as well is it gives you, again, a different perspective in terms of the Peace River Regional District of which we're a member. I mean, you have not only rural directors, but you have appointees that come on there, and it gives you a good on a regular ongoing basis, a good insight into what the problems and challenges are with regards to every one of the members that are there. It covers our whole area. So it's another, to me, it's a worthwhile organization to belong to, as well as being able to not only receive the kind of input that could affect us or not, and vice versa. So to me, it's a definite must that we at least have representation at the table.
Yeah, and you've been there, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, sir, do.
Okay, so we didn't need anything on that.
Nope.
So,
So who, I'm unclear on who makes that decision. Is that council? Is that something that you just make when you're at the regional district?
there'll be a vote on it,
So you have to get back to it.
and put that back in council to. Okay.
So then you probably want to get a motion from council then.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we do not support,
Maybe just
Planning.
remain as a planning voting member in the regional district. Remain as a voting member, yeah.
Voting member. Secondary. Okay. Any more discussion on it? All in favor? Question and answer period. Hold on.
Thanks for looking at it again next week. I just want to say that last year, we've had 1 week of programming with the summer reading club. And last year, we averaged 25 to 30 kids a day. This year, there are a lot of children in Tumbler Ridge. We're averaging 40 to 45. And we just started.
Roxanne?
I noticed that the Ministry of Transportation is not at the boat launch.
Yeah, they
Got
found
any
some,
feedback from that?
they found some bird nests.
So that means they're not coming this week?
I don't think they will be because they're gonna have to wait till nesting time is over and then they knock the
Okay.
trees down.
So does that sound like the fall? Like, I have no idea. Can I give you an idea when's nesting period?
They haven't got back to us, but I've
Oh,
heard
right.
this from somebody that's involved. But they did mention when they were here that they were hoping they didn't find any nests.
That didn't go so well? All right, I'll put it out there to my peeps. There's lots who enjoy our boat launch.
You think they would put that out there because that, you know.
So I'm hoping then that they'll give us another heads up when they're closing down. It affects our business as well too, so it's good to have a heads up when we can.
Maybe we can give them a call and just find out.
Yeah, I'll shoot them an email.
Thanks.
Anything else? This is too close, I think.
I just have one question. Do we need a motion to discuss the delegation that was here, to discuss things with the community forest? Should we plan that now, or?
Yeah, we should. It'd be good to have all the possible players involved.
The partnership or whatever, so we could have another PNP and
Yeah.
invite.
When's the next meeting?
September.
I guess we could, special meeting. This month is gonna, put in, August we could probably have one, because I think it's important enough to do that. It sounded like they're gonna back off a little while until we get our.
Mhm. And then by then, they may also know what the Ministry of Tourism is bringing at us, or if there's, been further discussion there.
And that was, just to bring that up, maybe there's an opportunity to meet again at the UBCM on that specific topic, because liability is gonna scare the crap out of everybody. I think that's the, it's pretty tough to guarantee you're gonna have a bridge washed out and have that liability on your books, or having to decommission it yourself. So.
That's something that's tough to bite off.
But I just think we should schedule something just to make sure it doesn't get postponed or pushed back.
That's right. So we'll do it with the plan special meeting. Okay,
make that recommendation.
Motion to close.
All in favor?
Okay, 5 minutes.